Tere tulemast, tervetuloa, welcome to the Security and Defense in the Baltic Sea Region conference, live streamed here from the Estonian Embassy in Helsinki. My name is Märt Vesinurm and I'm filling in today for a previously scheduled conference moderator, Reet Martin Seer, who is unfortunately unable to participate today due to an illness. She has asked me to express her appreciation to all of you, all the organizers and everyone here, and sends her best wishes for the successful conference. The Estonian World Council and the network of Estonian organizations in Finland are grateful to the Estonian Embassy in Helsinki, Ambassador Sven Sakkov, and advisors Jaanus Elvre and Grete Ahtola for hosting this event and for all their work and collaboration over the past several months. A special thank you to our most esteemed keynote speakers, panelists, and moderators. We look forward to a highly interesting and informative conference on very timely and relevant topics. We also would like to thank you, the Estonian Broadcasting Service, ERR, for providing live streaming and after viewing on the website err.ee, and the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for posting the conference video and making it available to viewers throughout the globalestonian.com for post-viewing. We would also like to thank our member organization, the Estonian Central Council in Canada, for their sponsorship. And of course, most importantly, we would like to thank all our viewers back at home all over the world and everyone here today in the Estonian Embassy in Helsinki. We live in a highly unpredictable and volatile world. They are dangerous times. Although the Baltic Sea region, or as of the succession of Finland and Sweden into NATO, its new nickname, the NATO Lake, has never been so well protected with the expansion of NATO. It is facing unprecedented threats from an increasingly aggressive Russia, which is waging hybrid warfare against Estonia, countries in Europe and democracies around the world. The most recent hybrid attacks even endangered civil aviation in Estonia, forcing the cancellation of Finnair flights to the culture capital of the EU, Tartu. Since February 24th, 2022, Russian invasion of Ukraine, Europe has been in the midst of a hot war, which Ukraine must win. Over the next months and year, there are many upcoming elections of great consequence around the globe, including in the United States. These will have far-reaching implications, including in the Baltic Sea region. The primary goal of today is to foster a deeper understanding and current emerging security challenges in the Baltic Sea region. We are very fortunate to have highly distinguished experts with us today on the topics that include implications of Russian aggression and disinformation, the role of NATO in ensuring regional security, and strategies for civil defense preparedness. We will open the conference with introductory remarks from Sven Sakkov, the Estonian ambassador to Finland, followed by Sirle Sööt, the chair of Estonian World Council and Association of Estonians in Sweden. And although he couldn't be with us in person due to his very busy schedule and travels, we thank the Estonian Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna, who has sent us his video remarks as well. So please, let's start with Sven. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and for the introduction. Welcome all people here in Embassy in Helsinki, but most importantly, all global Estonians all across the continents. If someone is watching us from Antarctica, please let us know. Probably not, but at least all the other continents are probably either online now or will be listening to us or watching later. Welcome to Helsinki, those of you who are here. This is the first real day of spring. It's a fourth attempt, I think, for spring to come. In Finnish, there is a specific saying, which is tagatalvi, or a kind of back winter, which basically talks about after a bit of spring, the winter returns. That there's 3 times the winter returned. Hopefully that is it, and we are in for the summer here. On a more wider term, and I'm not going to talk about the climate change, but actually political climate change. There are seismic shifts, of course, in European affairs. War is again in Europe. We should not underestimate or forget the significance of this. We do not know where this war will be going, but maybe after this half a day here and all across the continents, for those who are watching us, we will be having maybe a bit of a better mental understanding of challenges and opportunities coming from this seismic shifts in world affairs. I do not need to go through all that, because just to say that besides the ongoing war, which for us is a kind of an existential issue, we have a political uncertainties in US politics, to just name a few challenges what we have at hand in this year and in coming years. At the same time, of course, since we are live from Finland, we should note the fact that the shift also came to this side of Europe. Finland and Sweden changed their long-standing security policy lines just in last couple of years, and of course, as a diplomat, it has been a pleasure to witness that firsthand here in Helsinki. This conference is organized by the global Estonian community, Estonian World Council and others. We are providing the premises and the good services of embassy in Helsinki, what we of course do with pleasure. But I want to and need to note here that Finland is home for about 80,000 Estonians. If Finland were a city, it would be a third largest city in Estonia, right after Tartu. Of those 80,000, 55,000 are residents of Finland, but Estonian citizens, and then the rest are traveling back and forth for work-related issues. Estonia and Finland are united through trade, Finland being the number 1 trade partner for Estonia, through investment, again number 1 or number 2 on both sides of the FDI flowing. The biggest source of tourists to Estonia from Finland and vice versa now after the pandemic. The biggest group of tourists to Finland are Estonians. But most importantly, maybe we have this kind of dense network of organizations, civil organizations talking to each other, whether we talk about kennel clubs or shooting clubs, sporting clubs, pensioners clubs. They all have their friend clubs on the 2 sides of the Gulf of Finland. And this dense network is, I think, pretty much unprecedented. If you know any other 2 countries which have such kind of dense network of civil society organizations cooperating with the other one in other countries, please let me know. But now, without further ado, I have said my welcoming words. I will give now floor over to Sille, please.
Dear Ambassador, dear guests and friends, and also all who are joining us from behind the screens all over the world. And especially greetings also our Ukrainian friends. As President of the Estonian World Council, I have the honor to welcome you to our conference on security and defense in the Baltic Sea region. I'm delighted to see so many old friends and among the speakers and equally pleased to meet new ones. Our common concern is the security in the Baltic Sea region because we are living in serious times. The Estonian World Council was established in 1954 when the Iron Curtain divided the Baltic Sea into two worlds, the free world and the occupied world. And it was 10 years after the Soviet invasion in 1944 and the mass escape over the Baltic Sea when well-organized Estonian communities in Sweden, United States and Canada took initiative and established this council, together with Estonian central organization in the Federal Republic of Germany, Great Britain, Australia, Belgium, the Netherlands and South Africa. The aim was to coordinate the efforts of Estonians in fighting communism and liberating nations behind the Iron Curtain. Additionally, they strove to preserve the Estonian language, culture, and spirit for survival as a nation in their new home countries. The struggle for freedom required worldwide coordination and communication. Today, 2024, and it is 70 years later. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania have enjoyed 33 years of re-independence, turning the long-cherished dream of sovereign and democratic countries into a reality. However, the Iron Curtain by the Baltic Sea returned on the 24th February 2022. It no longer divides the Baltic Sea, but it looms on the border with Russia, the border of the European Union and NATO. Freedom starts from Narva, told Estonian President Alar Karis on the 9th of May, Europe Day in Narva. We are no longer fighting against communism, but we face new challenges from authoritarian governments seeking to undermine democracies. We are fighting aggressive Putinism, disinformation, and strive for truth and common values. Our new generations, who are raised in the information society, face the challenge of distinguishing between fake news and the real news. Russia's war in Ukraine has forced the countries of the Baltic Sea region to construct a coherent security architecture. The military threat from Russia to the Baltic Sea region is real. These serious times require clarity of vision, capacity to act, and persistence. Annual public assessments of the threat and the level of resilience help to raise awareness among the public and decision makers, set benchmarks, and encourage exchanges of expertise. And so, here we are today in Finland, a new NATO ally, to discuss security and defense in the Baltic Sea region. Thank you, Ambassador Sakov, for your hospitality, enabling us to convene here in the beautiful Estonian Embassy in Helsinki. And thank you our newest member in the Council, Network of Estonian Organization in Finland. Thank you.
Dear friends, thank you for gathering for this very important discussion today. And I really do appreciate Estonia World Council for organizing this. You have gathered to our very important and symbolic building. This building was built for Estonian embassy already in 1930s. And we have some of them as built for Estonian embassies in 1930s, but this is the only one where we are actually having Estonian embassy again. So this is symbolic place. I'm very sorry that I cannot participate today with this very important discussion because we have a global issues, and also I have to be now in a visit to Georgia together with our Latvian, Lithuanian and Icelandic ministers, because Georgia has taken the wrong direction, not towards European Union but towards Russia. So we need to participate right now, and I cannot be with you here. It is very important that we are discussing our security architecture in our region. I am very happy that Sweden and Finland has decided to join the NATO, because it gives us a lot. Now the Baltic Sea is NATO lake, and we are more protected than ever before. But we understand as well that Russia has started this aggression like more than 2 years ago, but Russia will remain a threat, and we need to prepare for that. Ukraine is not fighting only for themselves and only for us as well, but instead of us. And we need to understand that support to Ukraine right now by military means, but also politically, to bring them into the NATO and EU is very important. Because neutrality in the bordering countries of Russia is a green light for Russia for aggression. So we understand it, but it is very important, and Finnish people and also the Swedish people understood that Russia will remain a threat, and we can stand together against this only when we are strong. And stronger we are when we are together. A couple of years ago, I was holding the defense minister position, and we had a very good relations with Finland and Sweden, but now the situation is different. Being a full members of NATO means as well the Article 5, one for all for one. And it means as well that we have to exercise. In Estonia, the biggest and the largest military exercise, Spring Storm, is ongoing. I'm very happy that all our allies are there and we are exercising the real situations. It is important that we are investing more to our security. I'm sure that NATO Article 5 works, but we need to invest more as a Europe, and mainly in our region. And cooperation between different countries in our region on military level, but also on political level, is crucial. But the cool thing is that we are sharing the same understanding, not about the values, but also about the reality. We don't see such a scale of military troops of Russia the other side of the border right now, because they have sent them to Ukraine and they are literally gone. But we know as well that Russia has plans to increase their capabilities again, and we must be ready for that. Deterrence is important, and if we are strong, we have a solid plans which are full with the capabilities, and also we communicate that we are united. I'm sure that Russia has a fear not to commit to the aggression against us anymore, and we can live in peace. We are looking towards Washington summit. It is very important that we will work with these plans, what we already have, but we have to fulfill these with the real capabilities. The real capability of protect ourselves is very important, and I'm sure we can find a way out. It is also very important that we will say clearly out during the Washington summit that Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. We need to support Ukraine with the reforms. We need to support Ukraine to win the war, but we need to understand as well that Ukraine is not only asking the membership place in NATO, but also they can in the future protect us. They can give us huge capabilities to secure our regional security. So, dear friends, I wish you a fruitful discussions today. We are very close. We understand the same values, but most of all, we are ready to act together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again for all our introductory remarks, and Minister. We will do a little bit of a switcheroo to our program, and we will begin now our first panel on the topic of NATO's role in Baltic Sea region security. I would ask that our panelists come forward. So first we would have our Martin Roger, Director General for NATO and Transatlantic Relations from the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Then we have Joakim Paasikivi, Lieutenant Colonel from the Swedish Defence University. Anders Kasekamp, Professor of History, Chair of Estonian Studies from the Monk School of Global Affairs, University of Toronto. And this panel is moderated by the Estonian Ambassador to Helsinki, Sven Sakov. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Now, let's start with a first panel. I'm not going to go through the impressive CVs of gentlemen sitting next to me. You have them all in a program, and I think we could basically start off and start cracking on the issue of NATO's role in the Baltic Sea regional security. What I would ask the panelists is first to describe in 3 minutes, if possible, in very general terms, where do you see the Baltic Sea security being now? I mean, on the one hand, we have of course, the war going on in Europe. On the other hand, of course, Finland and Sweden have joined NATO, and Baltic Sea security have changed through that. But basically, kind of, looking from a wider perspective, in a way, how do you assess the health of the Baltic Sea regional security to be? And I would start this way around, so that Anders, you'll be first thrown into the fire or water.
Thank you, Sven. It's a pleasure to be back in Finland. This is my first time in Finland since it became a member of NATO, so it's particularly nice to be here. It makes sense for me to start first as well, because I'm a historian, and looking at the historical perspective, the answer to your question is very, very simple, that the Baltic Sea region has never been as prosperous and secure as it is now. As has already been referred to in some of the introductory remarks, the region can be characterized now as a NATO and EU lake, with only Russia excluded. But on the other hand, there is the paradox that while we are in a better situation than ever before, there is a war raging on the European continent, which is not at all far from us. And if NATO doesn't get its act together in supporting Ukraine, then there is the possibility that if the Ukrainians aren't able to hold the line, that the conflict could widen to this region sometime in the future, if Russia is victorious in Ukraine. So at the moment, the situation looks better than ever. However, there are storm clouds on the horizon. And so one is sort of on the battlefield in Ukraine. But there's also the political dimension that the rug could be pulled out from underneath us by a new Trump administration in the US. And not being a diplomat, and we're not having the American ambassador here at the moment, I'll say that the prospects are pretty grim if Trump is indeed re-elected. He's made no secret of the fact that he would not be supporting the NATO allies. I mean, the US Congress passed legislation that a president can't unilaterally withdraw from the Washington Treaty. However, if the credibility of the organization is put in question by the US president, then that is enough to weaken deterrence in this region. So, just for those quick introductory remarks, that yes, things look rosy at the moment, but the potential for things going south, in other words, badly in the future, are there.
Anders was in previous millennium my teacher at Tartu University, but now the table has turned and I can ask questions from you. You said that it has never been, also historian by education, you said that the region has never been as prosperous. It's more prosperous than in Hansa time, for example, at the height of the Hansa League, when you talk about the Baltic Sea region comparative to other parts of Europe.
Well, during the Hanseatic League, then of course Finland was kind of not as part of that prosperity as Estonia was. And Sweden and Denmark were adversarial to the Hanseatic League, right? So the Hanseatic League is actually sort of an identity construct which was revived in the early 1990s with Council of Baltic Sea States, right? The Germans were particularly keen on reviving this imagery of everything Hansa as being inclusive of Russia, right? Because of the Novgorod Kontor. Right, so that was a dream of a peaceful, prosperous, inclusive Baltic Sea region, which Russia under Putin has shattered and has excluded, unfortunately. And since you mentioned that I taught a course, the first course I ever taught in 1993 in Tartu, the course was fascism. Yes. Which I think unfortunately is relevant again, not only looking at the way the regime has turned in Russia, but what could potentially happen in the United States, of all places, under Trump.
True. Okay, thank you very much. Joachim, floor is yours. 3 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. There is a significant risk of just agreeing with the previous speaker, but I have to say that I agree with the previous speaker. From a Swedish point of view, or from the fairly new allies' point of view, and I'm happy to be the youngest member of NATO here, from the Swedish government side, we've said that the situation is worse than it has been since the Second World War. The security situation is horrible. We can be hit by war. We can suddenly become a state that is hit by war. And that's a mental construct that we try to keep out of the last 200 years. The Finnish president, Mr. Stubb, said that Finland has never been safer. Both of those things are true. The security situation in our region is horribly bad because our region stretches from Svalbard down to Turkey, to the Black Sea, and the Baltic Sea region cannot be excluded from the rest of Europe. But from a military strategic point of view, as a sort of even if in human clothing and not in human uniform today, the common defense planning of our region has vastly increased the safety and security of the entire alliance. And that is in a situation where, yes, the Russian ground forces are busy dying in Ukraine, but there are still significant military capabilities available to Russia. The Air Force, much of the Navy, the Northern Fleet, the strategic rocket troop, the nuclear capabilities, as well as all the hybrid means, the information, the sabotage, and what have you. So we are impacted by Russia's aggression in many ways. But unity gives strength. And the unity that is the alliance is crucial because Russia is provoked by weakness. And so I can only agree again with the possible bad consequences of a lessened cohesion of the alliance in January of 2025. And let's hope that doesn't happen, because if that happens, then our security, the region, will be especially impacted, I believe. Seeing that Mr. Putin and the Kremlin want to regain and administer the traditional Russian areas, which stretch, the propaganda picture says that Russia is not a part of Europe, but Europe is a part of Russia. Let's keep it not from happening.
Thank you very much. I think there is no imagination probably on where the Russian borders are. It just really seems to depend on the how imaginative the Russian commentator is. But Martin, moving to you, and then kind of if I add one chip on the table here, and this is the NATO lake issue, kind of thrown out kind of very quick. It's NATO lake. I have also seen some of the commentators saying that this should not be used. This is a bad term. That gives an impression that this region is done. It's basically you can write it off as being under control and no need of any new attention. Since this is directly at your table, how do you see that?
First of all, thank you, Sven, for co-organizing, and also would like to thank of course, the Global Estonian organizations for having me here to discuss those issues. To address immediately the question that you raised, certainly it's not a term that I usually put on the let's say, speaking notes of to myself or maybe to others as well, because maybe it's not factually the most correct one, the NATO lake terminology, and also I think it may also signal a sense of complacency that we would not like to signal at this point of time, because given Russia's assets in the Baltic Sea region, around Baltic Sea, and it will also signal wrongly, I think, as well, that security is done, history has ended in this region, everything is fine, where we know that this is not the case. So certainly, but I would like to underline, as previous speakers, on the positive side, certainly Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO, them becoming allies, I think, which is even a better term, is the biggest geopolitical and strategic shift in our region after us joining NATO and the EU in 2004, 20 years ago. And of course, it's the most significant geopolitical consequence of the full-blown Russian aggression in 2022. And of course, from Sweden, Finland's standpoint, from our standpoint as Estonia, and also from the standpoint of the whole Euro-Atlantic area, this is a very positive development, because it brings significant military capabilities to the alliance. It brings, let's say, coherence to the region, how you address security in the Baltic Sea region, and also brings together allies who see the most significant and direct threat to the alliance, which is Russia, according to NATO's most significant strategic documents. It brings together those allies that we can have then influence the whole alliance, how it postures. So that's on the positive side, and certainly there are even more defense industry capabilities, all that, as well as the positive political signal that this act of accession gives. I think it signals very powerfully the political relevance of NATO as well, because I think this is also important given the debates that we have had over the past maybe even 5 years back, when you think about certain statements made about NATO and its significance and role in the Euro-Atlantic security. On the negative side, as I mentioned, why I don't like to use the NATO like metaphor is the threat of Russia, because its objectives in prosecuting the war, its war of aggression against Ukraine have not changed. It still wants to subjugate Ukraine as a state, its nation, but also he wants to reshape the fundamental principles of Europe's security order. So on the one side, as previous speakers have noted, we have like a balance sheet. On the positive side, we have a significant positive geopolitical shift, but on the other side, we have Russia, which has moved its economy to a war footing, which has been able to already start to reconstitute its forces, and also a threat which will be a long term, as I would like to quote General Cavoli, the SACEUR, who has said that regardless of the outcome of the war, we have Russia that will be larger, more lethal and angrier with the West compared to the moment it invaded Ukraine. So this is the reality we have to grapple with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. But let's continue with of course, the main, and we really were pretty much the only real big security concern our region has, and which is of course Russia. There are people who say that they have emptied everything at the borders with all the bases from the borders with Nordic and Baltic countries. There's nothing there. There are others who say that the Russian reconstitution time is very short, in 3 to 5 years. There are a third group of people who say that they are ready to go now, because they have now 400,000 battle-hardened troops, old equipment, but a lot of that, and that they can basically roll on any moment to any direction. Kind of in a way, we do not know where the Russian imperial ambitions go, how far they go. There is a famous Russian saying that the Russian borders do not end anywhere. I mean, there's no end to Russian borders. You cannot define Russian borders because they go on forever. So kind of Martin, now going back in the order, in opposite reverse order from the first question, is that we know, of course, there is a force, there is a counter force, and how confident is the panel on the Western in general, but more specifically NATO's ability to meet this challenge? Washington summit is coming up. It is going to be a lot about Ukraine, a lot about Ukraine's movement towards NATO, but very much, of course, also about what is happening in the battlefield, what's happening there. So kind of if you look ahead for the next really half year, I would say, including the NATO summit in Washington, how do you see basically the state of play when it comes to upcoming Washington summit?
Well, certainly the summit and its success will be judged by how we address Ukraine and Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Whether we can show in a credible way that allied are steadfast in their support to Ukraine, and we do that not only by drafting witty and careful language in the summit final documents, but whether actually we can show significant improvement in terms of our real assistance to Ukraine. So in a way, we have the NATO-Ukraine agenda, which is ongoing. There are different, let's say, elements of that package that will be rolled out, hopefully, for the Washington summit. Part of that will I hope, also give a signal that NATO, in support of Ukraine, will be there in the long term. So there are discussions how to anchor NATO as an institution more into the support to Ukraine, because, as you may know, so far it has been mostly allies, not NATO as an organization has delivered military support to Ukraine. So those discussions are ongoing. But also it's an opportunity, and I hope it will be seized to really showcase real concrete assistance and pledges to assist more in the long term. So that because Russia's calculus is that they will outspend us, they will outweigh us, and they will exhaust us. And it is our responsibility to show that this is not the case. We have both the balance of resources, and we should also have the balance of resolve in meeting those challenges. The other part, of course, is all that is related to defense and deterrence of the alliance itself. There, we have in a way a roadmap ahead how to implement the regional defense plans, how to develop all the necessary forces and capabilities that are needed. So it's going to be a summit of jubilee, 75 years of NATO, but certainly situation in Europe, in the security of Europe, is not really a cause of overly celebrating, but also it should be an occasion to act upon.
Thank you, Raj. Joachim.
Well, the good and bad side with NATO is, of course, it's a political organization. So any military action is taken after political decisions. So the weak point, as it were, are the decisions, because the forces are enough to fight Russia and win if we come into that situation. It won't be an easy fight. It'll be a dangerous fight with the nuclear weapons at the far end, but we will prevail. So Russia's interest is to hit us where it hurts, and that is in the cohesion. So with all kinds of influence operations, all kinds of possible avenues, including the possible spoilers within the European Union and NATO, the skeptical nations. So that is, the main focus, I think, both from our side to keep the cohesion, and at the same time, put the orders to the industry, get the weapons made, get the ammunitions into stores, and send stuff to Ukraine. That's a given. That has to happen. But we need to keep the cohesion. We need to be united with our ideals. And then the question is, are we then dealing enough with presenting deterrence? Deterrence is in the mind of the adversary, of the Russians. And if they don't believe that we are serious, then it's just a question of reassuring ourselves.
Do we believe in your mind that we are serious, the Russians?
Well, I think that there is a problem, but they are provoked by weakness. And if they can see any kind of cracks in our resolve, they will then, they're risk takers. They were risk takers because they thought that we were weak in February of 22. Ukraine proved them wrong. After that, Europe and the US and the West, in the greater sense, proved them wrong. But as we've heard, the Russians are in for the long term. Do they have enough military capability to be an imminent threat? Yeah, in some arenas, air, maritime, hybrid. Ground, no, not yet. But as soon as the fighting in Ukraine goes down to a comfortable level, frozen conflict or let's say, lukewarm conflict, such as it were between 14 and 22, they can redeploy forces. And they can have, fairly significant forces with old equipment, but an old tank still kills.
Yeah, and why I ask that, whether do you think that in Moscow's eyes we come across as being serious? By we, I mean the whole West. Is that the last time I tried to make a calculation of what is the global GDP of the democratic West, which I mean a democratic world. including Australia, Japan, and so forth. And I came to about 45 trillion. The GDP of Russia is 1.5 trillion, 30 times is the difference. At the same time, when you look at the battlefield, Ukraine is ceding territory. And this is basically the background of why I'm trying to understand, because of course any weakness is really in the eyes of your enemy, and whether we are perceived as being seriously behind this issue. When you also look at the Kiel Institute tables, which is the best resource in looking at how much military or otherwise support countries have given to Ukraine. I'm glad to see my beloved Estonia being on the top of that list. Finland is number 4. But the average, when you look at all the countries together, is about 0.2% of GDP. That does not, when you look from Moscow, does that look like a serious effort?
No, we seriously lack a sense of urgency as well, the further from the Russian border we come. And it is also quite significant that the countries that are closest to the border, closest to threats, are those who give Ukraine the most, relatively.
Yes.
Because they've identified the threat. So, those are the cracks that Russia potentially could use or are trying to use. Unsuccessfully so far. But, the strength of our democracies are also our weakness, and that's the mandate periods, the general elections. And obviously, the electorate are interested in the private finances and all kinds of stuff, where foreign policy and war are not necessarily at the top of the agenda. So, and that impacts the perception of our resolve.
So it is. Andres.
Well, my thoughts were identical to Joachim's, but your big point, of course, is that the West has not realized the urgency. As you said, here in Estonia and Finland, people have, but Russia has mobilized a wartime economy, and the West is capable of producing armaments, but it's quite scandalous every time there's a new arms package to Ukraine, the sort of realization that why are we only doing this now? It's been going on for more than 2 years, and we're realizing sort of capabilities which we have, and we've sort of haven't ramped up productions, and governments haven't been putting in the orders and mobilizing to meet the moment. So it's kind of a mindset question, and of course, the further you go from the countries neighboring Russia, the more of a problem it is. Unfortunately, they're the ones with the industrial production capabilities, but they simply haven't got around to jacking them up. I also think, answering your original question, that there's no immediate military threat to our region from Russia. Instead, I think we're already seeing lots of gray zone aggression on the part of the Russians. That is sabotaging cables, pipelines, GPS jamming, weaponizing migration, and they're being pretty inventive and creative. And all of these sort of gray zone activities mean that they're all beneath the threshold of NATO's Article 5, so they're always testing and probing the unity and cohesion of NATO and the West in general. And it's kind of the reluctance of NATO countries to respond in kind. And that's, of course, as the previous speaker was saying, this sort of weakness encourages the Russians to probe further. And so they do, up the ladder of escalation on their part, but still in the gray zone, where it's not sort of appropriate from the point of NATO to sort of counter it in any sort of aggressive fashion. And of course, Russia has allies in Iran, North Korea, and of course China, which of course is trying to pretend that it's not an ally, but obviously is supplying with Russia with all sorts of, say, what is known as dual use equipment and resources, not direct military support, but all sorts of resources which can be turned into military usage and production in Russia. So I believe there was a figure earlier this year when at a point when the US Congress was stalling American aid, when the production of shells, artillery shells from North Korea outstripped that of what the West was giving Ukraine, which kind of shows this lack of urgency on our part.
Yeah, how on earth can that be possible that North Korea and Iran are giving more military support to our adversaries than we, a collective West, can give to our friend? I think this is beyond my imagination of basically that being possible. But kind of, it's in a way we will get to in the next half an hour what we still have in this panel to the issue of hybrid influence operations, and of course there is a separate panel on disinformation and civil preparedness. So we do not want to take too much of a big piece of their pie also, but. Still on the big picture, the big war. What do we have? Is that but why are we so timid? What is the and really, Anders, I look at you because professors are most free in using language. And of course, the civil servants and diplomats have to be most constrained about using their language. What's the reason? Are we forgetting what strategy means, how to use power in the world? How is it possible that the military, let's say, economic power, which is 1/30 of ours, the West, is actually advancing on the battlefield against our friend and partner and recipient of our assistance? What is behind this kind of, as I think Joachim or you said, that we have taken all the steps are too little, too late in a way. First, it was just the helmets and the machine gun was considered to be escalatory, and then machine guns were okay, but howitzers were escalatory, and when howitzers were okay, but the tanks were escalatory, and tanks were okay, then the aircraft were escalatory, and so forth. We just moved from one after the other. Meanwhile, there is like half a year of wrangling and hand wrangling, and thousands of Ukrainians die in a battlefield or underneath Russia terror bombardment. So what's wrong with the West?
Well, a lot of things in that sense. One is this general decay of strategic culture and using hard power, and always in every situation, regardless, favoring dialogue. Of course, that's what you diplomats do, right? Talk is jaw is always preferable to war, right? I think that's attributed to Churchill, who in the end, of course, was the one who stood up to Hitler. So there's this. The West has enjoyed peace for many generations and has gone soft in that sense. That's part of it. But it's also, the West is capable of action, but then there's also perhaps this mindset towards Eastern Europe and Russia, whereas Russia has always occupied a sort of privileged place as a superpower and a great culture, and there's this blind spot. There's been this blind spot to Russia's sort of imperial nature, and these countries in between in the former Soviet space have always been kind of discounted as not really genuine countries or somehow belonging to Russia's genuine sphere of influence. So take a look at, and I think the American ambassador perhaps might contradict what I'm going to say, but the American administration, even though President Biden has said the right things and done a lot of great stuff, the strategy seems to have been always not to support Ukraine so it can defeat Russia, but simply that it can survive, to put it in a position where it can negotiate a peace settlement with Russia, which would involve Ukraine giving up some of its territory. That seems to be the strategic outlook of not just the US administration, but the entire West, that Russia does have some sort of legitimate claim on these areas where there are Russian speakers who somehow, because they speak Russian, would want to be part of the Muscovite empire. And that is so deeply embedded in the mindset of, say, you asked me as an academic, you can think of these famous American realist international relations scholars, most notoriously someone like John Mersheimer from the University of Chicago. They see this as a question of sort of big powers deciding, right, where small countries in between don't have agency. It's for Washington and Russia and Moscow to reach accommodation. That very much suits Moscow. That's the way they look at the world as well, that these small countries in between, they're just pawns or extensions or proxies. And that is part of the general sort of mindset, I think, also that Western publics have been used to, kind of seeing Russia as this superpower, and that we should somehow be accommodating Russia's legitimate, and that's always framed as Russia having these legitimate security interests at someone else's expense. And we have all bought into that. Not we here in Estonia or Finland, but the rest of the world, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, I keep agreeing. But Yevgeny Primakov, the then Russian foreign minister, said in 1996 the three things that sort of was then called the Primakov Doctrine. Multipolar world, dominate the post-Soviet space, and oppose NATO. The first one is to have a position that is not justified by anything else than nuclear weapons. It's not economy, it's not anything. It's nuclear weapon. They can destroy the world, they should rule it. The second part is, I think, the most sinister one, to establish this concept of the post-Soviet space, defining the independent states by their previous occupier. The force, the oppressive force that did no longer succeed in suppressing them are still defining these independent sovereign nations in our minds. And that is really bad. And the third one, NATO. Well, NATO is not a threat to Russia. NATO is an impediment to Russian enlargement. Would we fail to see that because we didn't like the Baltic states stating the obvious? So I think that it's in our minds. And the problem with dictatorships such as Russia, such as China, who have common interests against democracy as an idea, that it's very easy for them to make decisions at a strategic level, even if they're wrong. Vladimir Putin is a good example of that. But they can make these decisions fairly quickly without apologizing. There is no coherent Western policy. I mean, the US has strategic interest. Great Britain and France aspire to be global actors. The European Union's, we have sort of every nation has a couple of different policy lines in that union. So the problem is that democracy gives strength, but also a lack of unified purpose, I would say. And that is, I keep coming back to that. That's our drawback. But when we look at the crucial things, economy, etc., then yes, we outweigh the Russians, we outweigh the Chinese and the Russians together with our military forces, with our information, the soft power and the hard power. But we're afraid to use it. We sort of make excuses for not using it, and when we're using it, we apologize.
Yeah. But I think this is a crucial difference really between the democracies and undemocratic governance systems is that democracies have a self-correction mechanism, so that if we make mistakes, we will usually correct them. The dictatorships can sometimes just keep on making mistakes because they do not have this kind of self-correction through the public mandate and democratic process written into their processes in a way. So I am very much hopeful that that is still the case and the self-correction still works. Martin.
Yeah, I would be tempted to, of course, balance the discussion by giving you examples how we actually have done something, and which I believe in as well, because I think we've done also unprecedented things. I'll give you an example. In 2022, when I was in Warsaw back then as an ambassador, I saw a paper there where we were discussing different options because back then we were trying to deter Russia from actually invading, and one of those amongst them was what kind of sanctions we would introduce, and then at the bottom of the page was the nuclear option. It was de-SWIFTing Russian banks. That was pretty much one of the first things we did when Russia's aggression happened. So I think in terms of support, of course, we have gone beyond our imagination 2.5 years ago. But Russia's aggression also has been so brute and genocidal. I think the problem here is that. When I discuss with some of the allies, I get the feeling that there is a conviction that for Russia, Ukraine always will be more important to them than to the West, and that's whatever we contribute in terms of how we support Ukraine, Russia will always outmatch it. That's in a way a conviction or belief of some of the interlocutors that I've gotten the feeling that that's actually deep down in their thinking. Of course, there is a challenge that we have that we don't have. We say usually collectively, we as the West, not Estonia individually, that we will support Ukraine as long as it takes, but we don't really spell out the theory of victory as a goal. Which is a problem because when you usually mobilize your resources, your actions to achieve a certain goal. So the question is to what you actually then mobilize accordingly. And another issue is that in the first months of back in the spring of 22, it was really the public audiences in the West that pressured the leaderships to do more. For example, I think in the Netherlands, a country that I also somewhat know, having studied there, they were usually very skeptical, let's say, of the Ukraine's EU accession path, and it came from the audience, from the public at large, to pressure the government that then moved ahead, and the same in some other Western European capitals. Now we see that maybe we have sort of different problems. Maybe the interest has waned a bit. We have a conflict in the Middle East, which also monopolizes a lot of attention in the Western public. So I think it's incumbent from the leaders. We cannot really delegate that to the publics then to pressure the leaders, but it's incumbent on the leaders to make the case to their publics as well. So what is at stake? What is at stake in security of Europe, and what is at stake really for them and the community of democratic nations at large? So this is something that I think that needs to be done. And of course, the worst thing that can happen is that this issue becomes an issue of domestic political football, and that could hurt the cause greatly. And this is something that it's also for the leaders to take responsibility to avoid that from happening.
Mm-hmm. I might add as a footnote that, of course, also President Zelensky has been very good in making the case for Ukraine directly to the Western audiences. And probably maybe in the next panel underneath the information warfare issues. Maybe that is also tackled, because I think this is something which has been extraordinary to witness. By the way, I guess as another footnote, maybe to wrap up this part of the conversation, and we have another 17 minutes and 3 seconds to go, is that it is paradoxical, isn't it, that many countries in Europe say that, well, we cannot give our military staff away because we need it. Paradoxical is that those countries who are actually at the Russian border have given most away. And those who are afraid of giving more away are actually further away from Russia. The second, that there are many countries in Europe who are worried about what Russia is going to do. I mean, if we do that, it's going to be escalatory, and then Russia will do something bad. Again, paradoxical that those countries who are actually bordering Russia, who will be at the receiving end of whatever Russia will be doing, are not worried about that. The third, paradoxically, of course, those are those countries who are actually bordering Russia, who actually know Russia. And those who are those worried ones usually do not. So those are some of the paradox about basically what we have talked about here before. But now, before coming to the hybrid influencing operations, just one thing which was left hanging before. And I want to poke Anders, you and Joachim and Martin. You do not need to chip in if you do not want to. But you both said that basically that there is if Trump is elected, then it's going to be a different ball game. I'm just kind of being a devil's advocate and poke you both at okay. But looking at the previous time Trump was president, European security was not in a bad situation after all.
Oh, well, there's a very clear answer to that. Trump was as surprised as anyone else that he was actually elected president. He did not expect to win, and he got a team of experienced foreign policy security makers from the Republican establishment. This time, who all quit or were fired. All the competent ones, even though, of course, Trump famously, of course, said that he hires only the best people. The turnaround was incredible in his first term. This is something about Joe Biden's administration, which I must praise, and gets so little attention. Everyone talks about Sleepy Joe, but I think the biggest argument for the success and the efficiency of the Biden administration is there's very little turnover. The team that he has assembled, the president can be an old man, but he has managed to delegate. He has such a strong cabinet. It's the same people, it's the same team, and that's very rare in modern American history, that the presidential administration, that the cabinet ministers have not sort of been fired, have been forced to resign, have gone into private business. There haven't been great leaks and rivalries within that administration. So I think that's very much to the old man's credit. Now, 45, if he comes back, Trump, he has been preparing, and he's learned, or at least his advisors and his supporters have learned from the first experience, that, and Trump has said himself that he wouldn't mind being dictator from day one. We need to take him seriously at his word in these sort of things. He is doing everything to undermine the justice system, to do away with all of the checks and balances and the guardrails. And now the Supreme Court seems to be sort of doing his bidding as well. And look at the influence the man has. This is completely unprecedented, that he's not even the official nominee yet of his party for the presidential election, and he is influencing foreign policy. Right? The holdup for many months of Ukrainian aid was not because of the administration, but because of a guy who hasn't yet even officially gotten the nomination of his party to be the presidential candidate. Never has anyone had that outsized influence. But the point is that he will be much more dangerous, and his advisors much more focused, and all of these sort of people who kept sort of the tradition of Republican foreign policy going under his first administration, they won't be there.
Okay.
Yeah, well, he'll drain the swamp of competence. That's what they say that they will do. And in the former period, I was at the Baltic Defense College in Tartu, and we had all kinds of high-level U.S. Delegations coming, and they all said that don't listen to what we say, see what we do. And there was the Defender 20 exercise, which was the largest one of U.S. reinforcement since the Cold War. A lot of good stuff. The problem with, as I see it, and I'm as a member of the faculty at the Defense University, I'm part of academia, which means that I can say whatever I want, and those who know me, they get scared. I think one of the problems with a possible coming Trump administration is that the only political program seems to be revenge on those who didn't let him stay the last time. Overstay the last time. So there is very little of a political idea other than that. And I think one of the more alarming thing is that he's now said that, the fees for this misconception of how NATO works is that should be raised to 3%. And well, yes, it's a good idea to finance defense properly. But this just goes to show that, well, the last time he criticized people for not achieving 2% and we're going to let Russia do what the hell they want with those allies. Now he raises the bar. So it's always moving goalposts. And that is very problematic. But, he's not in yet. Let's hope we'll keep it that way.
All right, we have 10 minutes to go. The hybrid influencing operations, and this is basically something which is ongoing as we speak. We're talking about the GPS interference. We're talking about the using migration as a tool of hybrid influence. Talking about cyber attacks on our infrastructure or potentially impacting our infrastructure. We have seen some actually very worrying signs of kinetic attacks on NATO's territory by Russian secret service related agents, especially, Estonia made one case public quite recently. Of course, information campaign is relentlessly ongoing. We have a lot of potential still for such kind of a hybrid mishaps happening. Underwater infrastructure, for example, one. We have had an issue with a Baltic connector, which is, surprise, not having any Russian connection as far as I know, which is odd. But, of course, shows to us and also to other potential actors that the undersea infrastructure is vulnerable. On top of that, literally, we have a fleet of shadow tankers, old, rusty, single-hull tankers moving along the Baltic Sea. There is an environmental catastrophe. It's just a matter of time. So, what is in our toolbox, really? What can we do about it, in a way? The war and peace is much more straightforward, in a way. Article 5, kind of, and then you have a hot war. But this is somehow a hot peace, or I don't know how to call it. But Martin, start with you. Basically, what can we do about all this kind of wide range of issues?
I have one sentence for your previous question.
Yes.
Which I was excused. I just want to say that whoever will be the next president, European allies need to do more, irrespective of, let's say, the color of the party that will come to power. That clearly will be also an expectation from a possible democratic administration, and I think that's also an understanding pretty shared also in many of the European capitals. But coming to hybrid, yes, I mean I think it's done to sow disagreement, discord, and tensions with our societies. I guess it's also done to stretch our resources. That we are busy with something that we usually are not. I think the number one that we all have to take care of is to have a sensible baseline of resilience. Sometimes there are no good immediate answers to a hybrid activity. For example, we had as you well know, here in Helsinki, the issue with GPS jamming adversely has affected also civil aviation in Estonia. Certainly, we will try to address it with allies. We summoned the Russian charge in the capital, but you also have to take care of. So, what will be how to increase the resilience that we are not affected by these kinds of activities by Russia? That we have, let's say, alternatives in place in terms of how to cope with different kinds of activities that they may have also a malign intent. So. The problem there is what we usually do is we try to, of course, make sure what has actually happened. We also make sure that there is a situational awareness nationally, but also amongst allies. If there's a case, there's a hygiene issue that our allies are also on the same page. So there's a common situational awareness, and also. The problem with hybrid actions is that they are hybrid in the sense that also the response is quite diverse. As I think Andres mentioned, that sometimes you cannot respond with a measure because we are democratic societies. So you have to think about what other types of responses can you do. And there's a true question of how to deter future hybrid actions, and always we don't have the response to that question. Calling out Russia's activities, attributing, it's important, I think. The bad thing is that Russia may not care about reputational damage anymore. So that's not something that maybe deters them too much. If it sees that its calculus, it's the cost-benefit calculus is to Russia's favor, so that we have a challenge there as well. So the question, I don't have a straight answer to you, but it's something that a lot of people think about in allied capitals, because what we see is that there is an uptick of those kinds of activities, and they're becoming more and more robust. If I can use a diplomatic euphemism.
Well, this is of course a problem that you cannot shame and blame someone who has no blame, has no shame.
Shame, yes.
Has no shame. Joachim.
Well, I'll try to be brief. I rarely succeed. Well, we have to go from the strongly worded emails into something more concrete, and a couple of those would obviously be to use the frozen Russian assets. I mean, there are huge values in various, both in sort of liquid funds, but also Russian interest that can be used to support the West and support Ukraine. Huge assets. And together with that, sanction individuals, for instance, the children of the Russian elite. Get them out of Europe, get them out of the West. That would hurt those people who are responsible. Fairly easy. The problem is that we want stability, and that also lays a wet blanket on all of our efforts, the quest for stability. And that quest is well, it's given us 20 years of Putin and see where we are. So we need to get out of our own comfort zone and do more stuff, creative stuff. And those two obvious ones are get the Russians money and get their kids out of Europe.
Yeah, good. Yes.
Ultimately, the one thing that can be done that would solve this issue is supporting Ukrainian military victory.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that would really help. The other things would be very sort of piecemeal responses, which wouldn't do away with the root cause of the problem, and it would reoccur in different forms and shapes. That's the only thing that would have genuine impact, and where all our efforts should be focused on supporting Ukraine, not just to survive, but to defeat Russia militarily.
Yeah.
This is, I think, something we can all agree with. Really, that and this comes to actually, Sille, when you were delivering your opening remarks, you said that we kind of, we used to fighting communism, and now we are facing a aggressive Putinism, and I would maybe widen it. But I mean, we are fighting the same Russian imperialism. It has just have different labels and in different forms, but it just comes back and in a way. The Soviet Union was nothing else than a Russian imperialist structure with a strange ideology and a weird name, but it's still the same thing. And I can say that from my personal recollection of having had a unpleasant opportunity of first 20 years of my life living underneath the Soviet occupation, which you can equate to a Russian imperialist occupation in the same way. We are exactly 10 seconds from the end of this panel. I still want to give you a chance, if there's something what you just wanted to, any panelist, you don't have to, if you just wanted to say one more sentence or two, we can accommodate that. Andres, you want?
Well, I would say, since we were talking about Trump earlier, and since this event is organized by this network of global Estonian communities, including the one in the US, that it would be vitally important for our American Estonians who vote in November to consider not just how much gasoline costs, but the wider impacts of their choice.
Yeah, well, I'll chime into what you said, Slava Ukraini, the Ukrainian victory. We need to work for that.
Very good.
Two things. First, Ukrainian victory, fundamental for European security. Second, let us use the new opportunities that we have from Finland and Sweden becoming allies, and really tap on all the opportunities.
We are working on that.
In the Nordic Baltic region.
And let's now give a round of applause to a panel.
Thank you to our panelists. Would you please just stay for one moment so we have an opportunity for audience questions if any come up.
I was just strategically trying to waste all the time so we know that we can go further. But I was caught. Okay, no questions.
Everything was
if there are none.
All right.
Yes, today's news, there is a common, how to say, pördumine, appeal from the European Parliament, EPs, about the Russian tankers on the Baltic Sea. And we understand this is a very complicated issue according to the international law. But isn't it any possibility to stop these gas tankers near Gotland to ruin? This is not moral, and it's difficult to understand how it could go on there. Could you comment, please?
Okay, so Joachim, what you can do?
Nothing, actually. I mean, that's the problem. Sinking them is a bad idea. It will be fun, but environmentally bad. And the other thing is that if we start a blockade against Russia, that is implicitly an act of war in the conventions. So it's very difficult. So what we can do is to have serious sanctions. I mean, and to some extent we've succeeded, and by we, it's the collective West, that India is now reluctant to accept the shadow fleet to some extent, and banks don't want to trade with those assets because it's the risk of secondary sanctions. But we do everything piecemeal, too late and too little, instead of doing things properly at once. We give the enemy, Russia, time to accommodate. Time to adjust, time to find new avenues of approach, find these ruthless shippers who sail these rust buckets. But within the confines of the Baltic Sea, very little we can do other than the angry emails, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm. Of course, this is a quite disheartening to realize that anyone can sail past you with a God knows in what condition of a rusty basket, and if it's really nothing we can do on environmental grounds in preventing such kind of things traveling across the Baltic Sea.
Well, possibly if we stop thinking as sort of constitutional lawyers, trying to find what the problems are, instead doing these businessmen and their lawyers as what possibilities are there. Yes, environment may be an avenue of approach, but we have to find new ways and be creative then.
All right. Lauri.
Lauri Nurmi, a journalist from Finnish newspaper Iltalehti. What is your assessment about Mr. Putin? Is he crazy or a rational actor?
Right, the psychiatric profile.
I've got this question before, and I think that sort of goes into astrology. It's a useless discussion, and as a Leo, I don't do those discussions. No, it's whether he's sane, whether he's healthy, if he's got cancer or whatever spots. It doesn't really matter. We have to see what he's doing, because he is rational from his point of view. And if we don't understand it, unfortunately it's our problem. So the initial problem where Stockholm, possibly Berlin, Paris, the intelligence agencies, according to open media, didn't see the invasion coming. That was because we had mirror imaging. We thought that he would think as we did. So the problem is, if we start speculating as is he sane, is irrational, we think too much about ourselves. He's rational in his mind, and let's try to see what he's doing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's make that the last question. Is that okay?
Just hopefully a quick question on sanctions and the effectiveness of those sanctions. We had a situation in Canada just a few weeks ago where news came out that the Canadian government had placed sanctions on one of the largest titanium producers in Russia, one that produces titanium for various different aircraft and weapons. And we found out just 3 or 4 weeks ago that the Canadian government had actually issued a sanctions exemption for this Russian producer of titanium at the request of Airbus Canada and Bombardier. So my question to you is how effective do you think the sanctions that we've placed on Russia are? We continue to announce new sanctions. Are we enforcing them properly? And do we continue down this route that we've already set ourselves on with sanctions?
Well, I think first of all, sanctions is a big debate around sanctions, right? The people who say they're ineffective, and their point is, well, first of all, we absolutely have to have sanctions, effective or not, because it's an important signal, right? That Russia's actions cannot have any consequences, right? That we have to be, I mean, if you're the EU, what's in your toolbox? It's mostly sanctions. Economic sanctions, that's trade sanctions, that's what the EU does, that's what it can do. And if you don't, I mean, the sanctions hurt the EU as well, but if you don't implement them, then you say Russia gets away scot-free. And then the question is that it's too easy because we're used to having sanctions which seem to be kind of, well, declarative politics, right? It looks like we're doing something, but then as you mentioned in your question already, there's the enforcement aspect. So all the attention is to the announcement, we're announcing sanctions, but then the follow-up of government agencies which actually kind of monitor and enforce and punish our own companies. That's where it gets difficult, right? It's easy when it's some third country that you're going after, but if you're going after your own companies that are breaking the sanctions, that's where governments really kind of turn a blind eye.
Martin, you want to say something?
I think sanctions work, but maybe not always to the effect that we would wish them to work. Clearly, I mean, I agree with Andres that they have, in addition to limiting Russia's access to certain technologies, to finance, to trade, they also carry a political message of what is their position vis-à-vis Russia's aggression. Avoiding circumvention, preventing circumvention is something that we debate now regularly, which, I think the problem has been acknowledged. We need to also tackle how Russia can find alternative partners that then mitigate the effects of the Western sanctions. Why I say that sanctions still work is that the Russians are actively also trying to influence decision makers also to let's say to change the policies. So otherwise they wouldn't do that. But certainly it's also in public media is that now China has become, let's say, enabler of Russia's war machine through different products, different dual-use goods. So that's also a big issue because what do we do about that as well, and what should be also, in addition to U.S. response, what should be European response given Europe's economic exposure to China.
And Joachim, last words.
Yeah, the foreign companies divested from the oil and gas industry in Russia, and the Chinese companies asked US to be exempted from sanctions. I mean, that's one example that obviously works, and Gazprom made a loss. I mean, there's no clearer example than that. Mm-hmm. So yes, they work, but not as quickly and not as decisively as we would like.
And of course, we have also applied them piecemeal, kind of a small piece at a time throughout the last 2 years. But I think now, after the first failed attempt to send the panel to their well-deserved rest, let's do it again. And may I ask you to have another round of applause. And now over to the day's moderator.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel, and very important topics. A lot of open questions, which I hope some of which we will get the answers to with our first keynote, whom I will invite to introduce Tuuli-Emeli Liivat from the Estonian Global Youth Network. Please.
Yes, hello everyone. Firstly, thank you so much for such an honest and insightful panel. And like Matt said, greetings on behalf of the Global Estonian Youth Network. As an Estonian living in Finland, I'm truly honored to welcome you all in Helsinki today. I hope the day is very fruitful and leaves you with great thoughts to bring to Tallinn in the upcoming days. It is of vast importance that these topics discussed today are brought to light to increase the awareness of the current and potential security challenges in the Baltic Sea region. It is only together with our collective knowledge that we can provide security to our homelands and support those that may be at a disadvantage to currently do so solely by themselves. Thus, the message is very simple. We, particularly those currently around the world watching us, need to continue to create discussion and openly share vital information among our networks for security and awareness, for democracy, and for freedom. I am truly glad to welcome our first keynote speaker, who, with a career dedicated to safeguarding sensitive information and fortifying digital infrastructures, has revolutionized the way organizations mitigate risks and combat cyber threats, ensuring the integrity and resilience of global networks. According to the keynote speaker, the NATO membership is the culmination of the defense operations between the United States and Finland, and we are excited to learn more. So please welcome on the stage the United States Ambassador to the Republic of Finland, Mr. Douglas Hickey.
Well, good afternoon. I have to say, hearing the panel, I was sitting in my chair and I thought, I want to get up and I want to go sit with these guys and have this discussion. Maybe we can do that. But first of all, I want to thank you, Sven. Thank you for asking me to be here today. Thank you, distinguished guests. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Sila, thank you as well, and Tuli Emile, thank you for the introduction today. And youth networks are important in order to better able to share best practices in leadership, to provide expertise to government and civil society, and to advocate for young people's concerns. It is critical we listen to these emerging voices. And then, the United States and the Republic of Estonia are committed partners and allies. As we marked the 100th anniversary of U.S.-Estonian relationships just in 2022, our partnership with Estonia, like our partnership with Finland, is stronger than ever. And congratulations on celebrating 20 years of NATO membership, as well as 20 years of EU membership this year. Over the period, Estonia has become a leader in Europe and the transatlantic alliance when it comes to promoting security, technology, democratic values, and supporting Ukraine. Your decision to join these institutions, as with Finland, demonstrates the commitment of your countries to our shared values and underscores the importance of not allowing one country, Russia, to dictate the foreign and security policy of its neighbors. On NATO, we'll be celebrating and have started celebrating the 75th year anniversary of the NATO alliance, an alliance that has continued to address evolving challenges, demonstrating its strengths, utility, unity, growth, innovation, and enduring resilience. With the addition of Finland and Sweden, NATO has never been stronger. We're celebrating 75 years of this historic achievements, as well as strong transatlantic bond, and highlighting NATO's vital importance in defending our future for generations to come. As President Biden has said, NATO is the greatest military alliance in the history of the world, but it didn't happen by accident, nor was it inevitable. Generation after generation, the United States and our fellow allies have chosen to come together to stand up for freedom and to push back against aggression, knowing we are stronger and the world is safer when we do. While we celebrate these 75 years, we are also intensely focused on the future. The United States will host the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. on July 9th. we expect to bring 32 allied heads of state together with partners from the Pacific, Ukraine, and the EU. At the Washington summit, NATO will advance the implementation of the alliance's most robust defense plans since the end of the Cold War, strengthening our collective deterrence and defense for peacetime, crisis, and conflict in the future. And what's the future look like? For one, NATO takes burden sharing seriously. Allies are sharing the burden of collective defense more than ever before, but more needs to be done. On both sides of the Atlantic, allies are ramping up defense production, ensuring the secure future of the alliance. A record number of allies are exceeding the 2% defense spending benchmark, including Estonia and Finland. Around 20 allies are on track to meet the pledge of at least 2% of GDP in 2024. This is great progress, but we need to do more. And we should remember 2% is a floor, not a ceiling. We thank Estonia for its strong commitment to national defense spending at least 2% of GDP on defense since 2014, and announcing plans to increase defense spending to over 3% of GDP. In recent weeks, Finnish and Estonian sailors have worked side by side with other allies in the Baltic Sea as part of Open Spirit 2024. This effort to clear the Baltic Sea of explosives, keeping all of us more secure, ensures the safety of commercial and passenger ships in the Baltic and offers an outstanding joint training opportunity. This year marks Finland's first year of many, I hope, participating in Open Spirit. NATO is also postured and prepared for future conflict and warfare. Today's NATO is a new alliance that has accelerated its adaptation to meet evolving challenges. NATO has transformed, enabled by redesigned force structure. The new plans are backed by modernized capabilities and command and control, ensuring the alliance is ready for any challenge. NATO multi-domain operations include cyber and outer space as well. And NATO will shape the future, incorporating advanced and emerging technologies and developing new approaches to innovate. NATO also continues to adapt to the future of cyber and hybrid challenges by enhancing its readiness capability to respond to a range of wide threats, including terrorism and authoritarian regimes. The alliance is taking concrete steps to strengthen resilience in all forms, including societal resilience, peace and security, cyber, energy, climate, space, and strategic capabilities. And in recent events under the Baltic Sea in the region's airspace in Finland and Estonia's respective borders with Russia, highlight the importance of working together to protect undersea critical infrastructure and to be vigilant about hybrid attacks and influence operations. And of course, the United States remains committed to defending every inch of NATO territory. Our bilateral defense cooperation continues to develop as well. The United States' committed partnership with Estonia's defense sector achieved a milestone last year. The military with the Maryland National Guard has been Estonia's military state partner since 1993. And we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the partnership in both the United States and in Estonia. And just this month, Finland signed a complementary state partnership agreement with the Virginia National Guard. After a commitment by President Biden at the Madrid summit, there are more than 600 U.S. troops deployed to Estonia on a rotational basis, the largest number in history of our relationship. Without a doubt, these additional U.S. forces bolster our firm commitment to strengthen collective defense and deterrence on NATO's eastern flank. And since 2016, the United States has provided security assistance worth over $650 million to Estonia, including most notably in support of Estonia's procurement of 6 HIMARS by 2025, the largest and most significant Estonia defense acquisition to date. Likewise, the U.S. defense cooperation with Finland continues to enhance our interoperability. Finland has a navy purpose-built for the Baltic and deep expertise operating in extreme weather conditions in the Arctic. Clearly, we have much to learn from our allies. And then annual naval exercises like Baltops, led by the U.S. Navy's 6th Fleet, including 20 nations, 50 ships, more than 45 aircraft, and 6,000 personnel, gives allies and partners a chance to practice large-scale maritime and amphibious operations. And on December 18th, the United States and Finland also signed a defense cooperation agreement. The agreement will allow our countries to deepen our close security partnership, enhance our cooperation in multilateral security operations, and together strengthen transatlantic security. And as we talked about earlier on Russia and Ukraine, the fight that Ukraine has been forced to wage with Russia is not only Ukraine's fight, it's everyone's. Ukraine is delivering for us, fighting for all of us. They fight every day to uphold the principles that matter to the United States and to every country that is in NATO. The United States is proud to support Ukraine's effort to build its current and future force capabilities, while we simultaneously provide assistance to help Ukraine defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, rebuild its economy, protect its citizens, and pursue integration into the Euro-Atlantic community. The United States has provided more than $85.8 billion in U.S. assistance to Ukraine since 2014, including approximately $80 billion since February 24th of 2022. Deliveries of the military aid package that President Biden authorized in April following the passage by the U.S. Congress of supplemental funding bill have been ongoing. We hope this aid gets to the front line as soon as possible. We know it's all critical. The amount of assistance that we provide to Ukraine is less than half of the overall total received by Ukraine. Our partners and allies have provided approximately $132.3 billion. We thank Finland and Estonia for your enduring support. And now we find ourselves at the beginning of a new era, one in which we are adjusting for a period of competition of ages of interdependence and transnational challenges in the Baltic Sea and around the world. President Biden has said U.S. foreign policy is at an inflection point, where the decisions we make now will have an outsized impact on the future. Old assumptions and structures must be adapted to meet these challenges we face, and as we know, there will be many. The European security competition in the 19th and first half of the 20th century was largely a regional contest that ended in calamity. The Cold War that followed, despite its name, was the most destructive war in human history. Today's competition is different. This new era we are in requires us to lay a new foundation of Western strength. The United States alliances and partnerships, like with Finland and Estonia, have been its greatest international advantage. Together, we can continue to create a freer, prosperous, and more stable world. But it will require continued hard work to ensure we all remain focused on the task at hand, conferring often following through on our collective commitments to take the steps necessary to defend freedom, advance the ability to trade freely, and protect the rule of law and the rules-based international order. Thank you. I appreciate your time today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Hickey. It definitely makes us happy here to hear of the US commitment to deepen our alliance even further and in the future. Next up, we will have a coffee break, before which I have been told that we would like to collect ourselves in the front stairs for a picture to be taken. And we will be back in around half an hour. At the 25-minute mark, I will go around telling everyone that please, let's start coming back. But thank you. Okay, and welcome back everyone at home and here at the Estonian Embassy in Helsinki. In our first half of our Security and Defense in the Baltic Sea region conference, we had a panel and a keynote discussing NATO's role in the Baltic Sea security. And do we have a treat for you next as we are moving into the information warfare field. And without further ado, I would like to invite Tuuli to present our next keynote speaker.
Thank you very much. As Merit said, our program continues on the topic of information wars. And our next keynote speaker is a distinguished investigative journalist and security expert who has made profound contributions to the field of digital security and disinformation warfare. She has exposed intricate networks of online manipulation and propaganda campaigns orchestrated by hostile actors, shedding light on the insidious tactics employed to undermine democratic institutions and sow discord in the digital sphere. Her work has prompted governments and tech companies to take proactive measures in combating online disinformation. With her unwavering dedication to uncovering the truth and defending democratic values, Jessica Aro continues to be a formidable force in the ongoing battle for digital security. So please welcome to the stage, Jessica.
Thank you so much for this very kind presentation. I'm really flattered and happy, and I'm really honored to be here today. Thank you so much for having me here. I will today address the most interesting topic that I've encountered as a journalist. I have background in investigating Russia, and it dates back actually to my childhood because already my grandmothers have taught me to be aware of Russia because they had really bad basically war experiences about the Soviet Union and had been forced to defend from that and or to escape from that. So they taught me very, very carefully. But of course, when I grew up, I wanted to find out myself. I wanted to form my own opinion. I moved to Russia. I studied there as exchange student. I was there early in the Putin's era. But already back then, he was taking the media under his thumb, speaking every day on television, on all of the channels, and manipulating people's consciousness. I just didn't know how heavily back then. So I will today take you through my investigations, what I have found out, and what others also have found about this extremely important and a fascinating topic at the same time. I have the approach that I have been interested in finding out, does Russian information war have any real impact in real people? Because if it does, that's what makes it super dangerous. And I will show what I found out from my book and how I basically started 10 years ago. And I will also present you some of my findings from my recent book about Russia's hybrid warfare. So we'll begin with the history. So I just want to make a notion that the Kremlin has really practiced, and they already started way back in the day. But this is one really interesting example what struck me in the history, how the then KGB chief Alexander Shelepin got the task to modernize the KGB in order to find ways to attack the West. to harm it, to damage it, without using the means of kinetic physical warfare. And he brainstormed with the best of the agents, and they came up with this idea of false information spreading. And this information is based on defector who defected to the West and disclosed this. And I also want to say what I also witnessed in Russia was that unfortunately the KGB Putin's information warfare's first target is the Russians and Russian people. And you can see it very clearly, for example, today, how the ordinary Russians are attacking Ukrainians. They are basically being transformed into weapons with this information warfare fed to them from every channel 24/7. Here, also some insight from Russian senior officials. This is Sergei Shoigu, who at least until yesterday was Russia's long-term defense minister. And he already back in 2015, as I started to really look into this matter, he told publicly that mass media is a weapon and information is a weapon, while he was giving out medals to the most patriotic journalists in Russia. And also he told the Russian media that this is a weapon that can inflict serious damage. Also, Finnish researchers Pynnöniemi and Massiri back in 2015 found out that the Russian military doctrine really invested heavily. It was updated, and they really added a heavy portion of underlining the importance of the battle in the information space. They feel that they are attacked in the information space, so they need to counter-attack. And this shows in their doctrine really well. And for example, they're quite open about this too. So for example, 2017, they told that they had founded these information warfare troops who conduct stronger and more efficient counter-propaganda. So of course, no one believes that they invented these troops then, but for some reason or another, they had the interest to share this information in 2017. Simultaneously, some might remember they founded this website to mark Western fakes, where they actually gather, for example, articles of the Western medias, which are basically telling about Russia and Kremlin in a manner that the Russian senior military high-ranking officials don't like. So that's how they then end up in this site. Here, very interesting guy also, Andrei Illarionov, who I saw giving interesting remarks, quite visionary remarks, back in 2014, 2015, when Russia started its secret warfare against Ukraine and hybrid warfare against Ukraine. Of course, it was also almost since the beginning full-blown genocide at the eastern Ukraine and very violent already from the early stages. But back then, for example, I have to tell you, I was working as a journalist. It was super difficult to find out, based on news wires and based on news agencies' materials, what is really happening in eastern Ukraine. Who are taking control? Who are these rebels who are set to take control the eastern Ukrainian cities and medias? It wasn't very clear, and that's the whole point of Russia and the Kremlin's information warfare, and that's also how it becomes a security threat, very concrete security threat if you don't know who is the attacker. Here, I asked Illarionov, who was speaking in Estonia. I'm really happy about that conference because it taught a lot. He told that the reason why Russia wages information warfare, of course there are many, but mostly political reasons. So they want to get political gain. And one of them being that they want to justify their secret warfare against Ukraine and show their might, but also that they want to show their might like a village bandit and also twist the facts. So there's very small crash course. And why this guy is important? I forgot to mention that he's former insider of the Putin's inside group because he used to work in the Kremlin as Putin's financial AD. But he left 2005 to United States to become a researcher and told while leaving that Russia is no longer a democracy. Here, very interesting also figure and very interesting channel and network, this RT, former known as Russia Today, which operates in different continents and countries, and has been very influential and very popular. And for example, based on US National Intelligence Directorate, RT America back in 2016 was super active and the most active weapon used against United States in order to promote Donald Trump as the president, which was the Kremlin's favorite candidate. And it had office, for example, in Washington, D.C. back then. So, but anyways, they tell themselves that how they are capable of conducting information war against the whole Western world. And they want to be ready already during peacetime because they cannot be establishing this information weapon during the conflict time. So this is what their own so-called editor-in-chief told. I found from the Kremlin's own website information that shows that Margareta Simonian, who is the ill-famed chief editor pictured here, has actually being quite close to Putin and giving out common interviews with him in which they joke in a very familiar way with each other and say that they have been, or this kind of channel has been in the works and in the planning, for example, at least as early as 2005, if I remember correctly. Here, very interesting techniques to so-called knock the enemy's brain out. This is based on a blog post and a social media post by a distinguished Russian publisher and author, Vladimir Yakovlev, who wrote some years ago about special combat propaganda. This is very interesting because this special combat propaganda is being taught in the same university where I have been studying in exchange, in the crown jeweler of Russian education system, the Moscow State University, named after Lomonosov. And in there, the officers are, according to Yakovlev, teaching in an atmosphere of secrecy these different techniques to basically conduct psychological information warfare against. And what really bothers me, is that they teach these techniques to attack civilians. And us civilians, we don't really have any kind of means or methods to protect ourselves, and we should be taught these methods. So, and this is only 3 of those examples that Yakovlev has been putting out online and telling what he was taught. And this is journalistic faculty, I forgot to mention. Here also, one of my stories back in 2014 that really made me a target of a harassment campaign, which is on its 10th year this year. So I had been writing about Russia's activities in Ukraine, as well as then I had noticed that super brave Russian independent journalists already back in 2013 had in fact uncovered Troll Factory in St. Petersburg. And in that troll factory, they were paid to produce comments as if they were real people, when in fact those comments were pro-Putin and coming from them who were paid, who produced them in shifts. So I wanted to know, with the help of crowdsourcing, this information seeking from the audience, had Finnish people met this troll online and how had they reacted? It was super interesting to me, especially the part how had they reacted, because that I could show me whether people are prone to take orders or let foreign countries influence troll to really affect their thinking or even behavior. So that's what I really wanted to know. And here is the campaign that I was subjected to immediately. This campaign, this guy who is also maybe known, or I think he is known in Estonia because he has been also putting out some conflicts over there. His name is Johan Beckman. He is Finnish national, and he has himself told already 2014 that he represents a think tank in Moscow named Russian Institute of Strategic Studies, and this institute is in fact some kind of hybrid operation, I could say, because it is supervised by Russian intelligence officers, and for example, they are all appointed by Putin himself. So this was 2014, and in 2017, only 3 years after, and only after the Russian trolls had already attacked the US elections 2016, Reuters came up with a really great investigative article in which they actually exposed this place as being the one which designed the hacking and trolling and fake news campaigns against United States elections. So they had blueprints, papers, documents that they had produced and taken them to Russian Duma, to some Duma members for discussions. One example of how Russian disinformation, information warfare is a genuine security threat is guys like these. He's already, unfortunately, passed away. He's a guy from Eastern Finland. He left to fight in Russia's side of the war as early as around 2015. Due to the fact that Russian disinformation about the war was spread online and on social media, and he wanted to go there to fight against Monsanto and also to defend Finland against United States and such. So this is what people do when they cannot support their well-being of resisting to these calls of Russian messages of information warfare. And we actually had a full Finnish nationals ring spreading this material and organizing other Finnish people to go to Russian side to fight. And I even asked them, I called them and asked, do you feel responsible for the lives that will get lost in this business? They didn't really answer, but I also asked them that, so you recruit these people, and they sounded proud about it. And they had this system. They set up, for example, a fake embassy of Donbass in Finland, through which they helped the travel arrangements. Also, by the way, similar thing happening around Europe, not so much anymore, but 10 years ago or 9 years ago, it was happening. And in some European countries, some of these foreign fighters who went to the Russian side have been convicted. In Finland, no one. So here is flag of Finland that has been smeared with Nazi symbols, and it says in Russian here, Finnish fascism, and someone sent me this material back in 2014. And I was restless because I realized that this material that tries to blacken the image of my home country and label and demonize Finland as Nazi state already existed or could be really easily produced. And I had seen similar material being spread about Ukraine already well before these days. And that's one of the oldest methods of propaganda. And this is demonizing. First you demonize the target, thus you legitimize all attacks against it, and also motivate real people to join the fight against the so-called legitimate target. Also in Russia, people went to join the army to fight against the Nazis that were allegedly, according to Russian state media, according to Russian information warfare, governing the brothers in Ukraine. And when they got to Ukraine, those soldiers, some of them gave interviews to the media saying that they were actually very disappointed because they couldn't find any Nazis or fascists to fight against. So here is a really interesting troll group that was founded right after my first investigation came out. And in this group, where they conducted you can say mass psychological influencing. So there were anonymous or fake profile administrators in this group, as well as known propaganda spreaders of Russian disinformation, who were making up the rules and basically throwing out everyone who tried to counter message what they were saying and brainwashing people. So these types of rabbit holes are now and have been for many years all across the social media. And this was named Russian Troll Army, this group, and similar groups operate in so many different countries too. And also here we also went with my colleague Mika Mäkeläinen, our Russian helper, to the troll factory in St. Petersburg back in 2015. This was in February, as we wanted to find out, to take really out all information we could. So we found out that they were recruiting back then already people who would be able to work in 12-hour shifts, also during nighttime, also in English language, and their task would be to produce material online, produce news online. And when we called them and asked what kind of news do you want me to produce if I want to come there to work with you, they said political. And thus we could tell that there was some kind of international political operation ongoing already as early as that. And also we met with the security guard of the factory. Unfortunately, he was of course threatening us with the police, but he was also disclosing interesting information, such as that this building here, that this is so-called administrative object in Russia. Those are very specially administered and specially protected buildings that usually belong to the state. All the same time, while this place pretended to be an independent commercial company, was in fact a Russian state-secured object. So here, also very small, it could seem insignificant, but this was back in 2015, and I copy-pasted this text from Facebook event in which some trolls or activists behind fake names were recruiting people to come to the Finnish broadcasting company in which I used to work at that time, and they actually could to harass journalists like myself. It was a revenge of the reports that we made from the troll factory, and only a handful of people came, but the point is that they came. The point is that these cyber operations, if you may, they don't stay here in cyberspace. They are meant to cause something like this, or much more massive in the real world, in the physical world. And we have really seen that. Then I just will show you some of the harassment that I have gone through. Someone sent me a message pretending to be my father, being dead for 20 years. He actually, or this person used my father's real name. But also then I continued the investigations, and I published the stories which included information what I had found out about the Russian trolls' impact in real people after speaking to or getting hints and tips from around 200 different sources. And I found out that many Finns had been actually already impacted. Also, you could say that the Finnish freedom of speech had been impacted. Some people had quit discussing Russia issues online because there were so many Russian trolls attacking them, smearing them, harassing them after they had only voiced out information, fact about the Kremlin. Also, some people turn into propagandists. When they succumb to this material, they cannot resist, they start sharing it to their own networks. But also there is, of course, the finding that some of the Finns are not influenced in any way, and only what they managed to do, the impact was, some sources said, that they only found out that Russia also does information warfare on social media. So here also some of the messages that I found back then, and nowadays, 10 years later, they look really, really familiar. But this was the material that the trolls were spreading using memes, pictures, videos, YouTube videos, sometimes these cross-media operations in which they would, for example, one Twitter troll would be spreading the same material from YouTube, but also share it in other forms as well. Mostly, or some trolls' task was to spread the material originating from either Russian officials and or from Russian state-controlled media to different language zones, different language areas, to different these troll groups and troll communities, which, by the way, I have to give some credit to the Russian troll architects that they're quite good in kind of like fostering, taking care of these communities, building communities, a thing that us the regular journalists never actually did. Also more field material. Such sites, it's WTF paper that already 10 years ago started translating Russian RT materials into Finnish language and putting it out in this site that said that this brings the alternative news and the news that the mainstream media is hiding. Then when you look, okay, what is in here? Mostly fanatic, like anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, really divisive themes, conspiracy theories. Now when you watch it, it's this paper online is, for example, promoting Russia's military material and also a COVID conspiracy here. Just one portion of the harassment targeted at myself. My privacy was really intruded, and there's over 300 stories until today that have been produced. And the problem with these stories is, again, I want you to come to the theme of my speech, information warfare as security threat. These types of materials are designed to incite real people's emotions, to really incite actions, to really incite people to, for example, go after me or go after Ukrainians. Very soon after February 22, I was hinted by someone who had gone into a WhatsApp group in which Russian influence agents or Russian activists were inciting people to go after these Ukrainians in Finland. And they were using so bad hate speech, they were sharing, for example, photos of weapons and such. So here also, unfortunately, some companies also sponsor these YouTube channels in which there is this material. And let me just really quickly ask technology guys back there. I have a clock here showing that I have like 5 seconds, but the program says I have 15 minutes. Which is correct? Now the clock has ended. All right, I'll keep going. So then I actually called to some of these companies because there were also companies that I'm a customer of, and for example, dairy company and insurance company, and just like your supermarket company. And I asked them, do you know what you're supporting? Do you know what you're paying to when you advertise in these channels? And at least the communications directors, they were terrified. They didn't want this, and they told me that this is an accident. They didn't know. They had just tasked a media company in between to find interesting social media channels for them to put their advertisement to. Here I have to present you my dear friend, Renata Juska, who unfortunately has passed away, who was a target of heavyweight smear campaigns and Russian security services filth for many, many years. This YouTube video was the one back in 2013, which unfortunately ended his career as the then ambassador of Hungary, of Budapest from Lithuania. Sorry about that. And Renata was such a visionary and such intelligent person and such a reformer also and courageous person that he became targeted because he was early on helping Belarusian civilians and trying to help democracy to be put back in place for the people of Belarus. And this is how he got spotted by the Russian security services first time. So his phone discussions with other diplomats were recorded simultaneously with 2 other Lithuanian diplomats' phone calls, and then they were edited, molded, put false, in some way right, but some way falsified subtitles to YouTube, and it caused diplomatic scandal and media scandals in 4 different countries. But here also Elliot Higgins, maybe you know the guy, does a great job with Bellingcat community and has been investigating, for example, so many Russian crimes and MH17, how the Russian took it down, and for that become also a heavyweight target for smearing, coming from Russian state media as well as Russian officials directly, and of course pro-Kremlin fake news sites. Here, a friend from Sweden, Martin Krag, who is a researcher in Russia, and he is very distinguished, and after only one article in which he and his colleague really gave specific details and interesting new information about Russia's influence operations against Sweden, he became targeted by Russian state media such as RT, by Swedish or Sweden-based pro-Kremlin fanatics, and also then some far-right activists on Twitter, as well as fake media, as well as this is one of the biggest tabloid in Finland, in Scandinavia, the Aftonbladet Culture. Sites started to use the same smears that the fake media and Russian media had been used against him. So in the end, a Swedish, proper tabloid started to say that a Swedish researcher is actually some kind of helper or assistant of military intelligence of Russia. Of Great Britain. And here also some other quite recent operations. I started at some point to looking at the countries and areas and political events in which the Russian disinformation attacks were specifically visible, and in which some researchers found Russian troll and or Russian state media operations, and they were just too many to even to count. But one of some examples that I also have looked into more specifically, I went recently to Ghana, to West Africa, and to Accra, from where 4 years ago the CNN, as well as Facebook, as well as really brave Ghanaian journalist, had uncovered a Russian troll factory. In this troll factory in Accra, at the outskirts of the capital, it's actually just your basic one family house, hidden in a really nice new neighborhood. It's not an office, it doesn't look like something that people would go to work into. But that's where it all happened, and that's where a guy who lied about his own identity of being, for example, from southern Africa, lied the young employees that their job would be to actually to fulfill and encourage the African and Black identity with social media messages. So they were targeting social media messages to African Americans in United States. And when looked more closely, those posts and messages were inciting hatred and division and even violence, and promoting the idea of injustices, as well as other very divisive matters. But here also some other examples. Russian trolls were all pro-Brexit. Russian trolls have fueled anti-vaccination debate. And even, I have to mention one interesting example by the German intelligence services, who back in 2020, quite soon after the COVID crisis started, they actually warned the population about the Russian state media's influence in Germany, because at that time the Russian state media in Germany was promoting the idea that COVID is not dangerous at all, for example. Also here is some more recent information warfare claims, but it's also so difficult to just even put this in a list, because the list is just never ending. But you can see that they have listed us all as hostile countries and trying to still falsify their own actions in Ukraine. And what I really realized when going to West Africa, I seriously realized that so much of this Russia's information warfare that we think is targeted at us, and we feel superior, and we feel that we can only laugh about this. No one believes this. This stuff is well believed outside Europe, outside certain areas, geographic areas. I mean, this stuff is credible somewhere else. We just see it from our own perspective and our own very privileged kind of viewpoint. Here also, one of the most disgusting posts I've seen coming from the trolling MFA Russia Twitter account. This was in the spring 22, when the Western countries started super quickly to gather help and assistance and military help to Ukraine after Russia had accelerated its genocidal war against Ukraine. So what they stated, it's actually now already happening. They are threatening us with enormous risk to international civilian aviation and other means of transport in Europe and beyond. And when I look at this GPS disturbance, and when I look at what the Russian senior high-ranking military officials themselves say about hybrid warfare, hybrid attacks, covert warfare, as they name it, this is exactly their cup of tea. This is exactly what they are doing. So sometimes there could be some truth in these stories. Here also, to conclude, what the Kremlin wants. This is what I'm seeing, what they want at least. They have so many other things that they want too, but here are some of the most recent ones, and this is very specifically looked from Western countries' point of view. For example, in Western Africa, what they want is to promote Wagner. They actually built YouTube channels that have these robotic, probably AI speakers and speeches that only promote endless speeches about how good Wagner are, how bad the France security forces are, and how they should trust the Russians, how the Russians are doing well, and they actually gain following from there. But yeah, so I will actually end here, and I'm really looking forward for the panel and looking forward to the insight. So thank you very much.
We also have 5 minutes for questions if anyone would like to ask anything. In that case, thank you. It was super interesting, and
Thank you.
thank you for your work. It's really important. So,
Thank you.
thank you. So, having had this introduction into the information warfare waged by Russia, I would like to invite our second panel to the stage on the topic of civil preparedness and disinformation. Our panelists today are Jay Jansen from Strategic Communications at NATO. Please. We have Jakub Kalensky, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council Eurasia Center and a former deputy director of COI Hybrid Influence. We have Marko Mihkelsson, member of the Estonian Parliament and chair of the Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee. And then our moderator of the panel, Markus Kolga, president of the Disinfo Watch and a fellow of the MacDonald Laurier Institute of Central and Eastern European Council in Canada. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you for that, Martin. It's a real great honor for me to be here today and to be with these amazing panelists. It's a real all-star panel that we have here today, and to follow Jessica, who I've long admired all of your work. Thank you for all of your contributions to our understanding of this threat. it's just incredible the work that you've done. The modern phase of Russia's information warfare against the Western world began right here in Helsinki in the mid-2000s, when the Kremlin and its proxies engaged in the denial of the Soviet occupation of the Baltic states, with a significant focus on manipulating Estonian history. And Jessica brought up one of the individuals who was involved in that as part of that influence operation, Johan Backman. Putin's Finnish influencers, like Johan Backman, amplified and lent their own credibility to Russia's historical denialism in efforts to delegitimize the sovereignty of all three of the Baltic nations and to marginalize and intimidate regime critics, including activists, journalists, and elected officials. The launch of a book about Soviet-era repressions, co-edited by Sofi Oksanen and Imbi Paju, titled "Fear Was Behind It All," became a flashpoint as it reinforced the truth about the Soviet occupation and its repressive nature. And if you haven't read this book, you should absolutely do so. Unfortunately, it hasn't been translated into English, though. Since that time, Russian information operations and warfare has expanded to, of course, become one of the leading threats to the stability of the democratic world. And it's only now that NATO allies beyond the Baltic Sea region are starting to take it seriously. So with us today is truly an esteemed panel who have themselves experience in the front lines of this battle to defend our information spaces and our cognitive sovereignty. Over the next hour, we'll hear a little bit about their experiences and their perspectives on the current status of that war and the evolving threats that we face. We'll hear how Estonia has endured and developed resilience from one of Estonia's preeminent foreign policy thinkers and former editor-in-chief of Estonia's largest national daily newspaper, Postimees, member of parliament and chairman of the Estonian Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee, Marko Mihkelson. We'll hear about how Russia is targeting NATO and our forces stationed in the Baltics, and how we're collectively working to defend the alliance and our defense forces from Russian cognitive warfare, from my Canadian countryman, former Brigadier General Jay Jansen, who's currently the Strategic Communications Director for the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe SHAPE. And we'll hear from an early pioneer in the defense of our democracies against Russian information warfare, Jakub Kolensky. Jakub was a key leader in establishing the eminently impactful EU versus disinfo within the EU Eastern Stratcom, which we've modeled Disinfo Watch on. He now helps lead the work at the Helsinki COE for hybrid influence operations, and I would say that Jakub is probably, in my books, probably one of the top 3 experts worldwide on disinformation. So it's amazing to have you here. But we'll begin with Marko. Marko, you've been on the front lines of this battle to defend our collective information space, and you've seen Russian efforts to manipulate Estonia and, of course, Ukraine. Where are we at from your perspective, and what are your experiences going back even to the Cold War?
Thank you, Marcus, for this kind words and introducing us as a star panel here. But obviously, after Jessica, it's very difficult to be a star. So actually, as a historian, I have to go back into history, and actually, I like that Jessica brought up this the mark of Shelepin from 1958. I would like to add just that basically the very specific disinformation unit was formed among Russian secret services already very early stages after they ran over monarchist Russia, and in 1922 basically the unit was formed in order to use the open society's tools like media and freedom of speech to attack Western world with sophisticated tools and means in order to secure the Russian interest in one and another country in the West. So they have used the very same tools for more than 100 years nowadays. And specifically after Shelepin and during Andropov time as a director of KGB, this was raised to the level of sort of scientific approach, how to manipulate individuals, societies, the Western world. And obviously after the social media was able we started to use social media early stages of this century. They were very lucky, of course, to have this tool to fight for hearts and minds around the world. But I would like to argue, in case of Estonia, that we have been rather immune to Russian propaganda and informational warfare. Of course, not 100%, but in general terms, because of our own history. Because Russia has used propaganda, informational warfare always, including also during Soviet occupation. While Jessica showed us the one of memes about Finsky fascism, but this was the very constant sort of labeling during Soviet period, and Estonians, Lithuanians, Latvians were constantly labeled as a fascist. In order to consolidate sort of Russian understanding who are the potential enemies. And this is what is going on to this very moment. Also, early 90s, nothing changed. This was one of the biggest mistakes of the Western world, who thought that Russia changed after the collapse of Soviet Empire. They didn't. Actually, I worked in Moscow as a journalist mid-90s, 94 to 97, and I witnessed numerous times how they labeled us, how they used sort of very specific topics against specifically Estonia or other Baltic nations, like we are discriminating Russians, that we are Nazis, we don't know what really happened during World War II. Obviously that time their aim was to isolate us and not to allow us to join NATO and the European Union. But the very same sort of tactics they use nowadays. Just a few days ago, the very same Maria Zakharova made a statement that Russia won't never leave behind their compatriots in Estonia and other Baltic nations. Interesting why this sort of statement was made. But again, as I said, we are relatively immune because we know Russia. We have gone through all those atrocities through the specific last century, but for longer than that, as we are neighbors of this incredibly barbaric nation. So, but saying that, still, I was amazed during last, let's say, 10 years when I go around in Estonia, meet people and discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine, which started in 2014. Don't make mistake again, that this war didn't start in 2022. That the narratives are still there, what is shared by Russian informational warfare, like anti-Americanism, that NATO is encircling Russia. This is NATO's fault that Russia started to defend its interests in Ukraine, invading Ukraine, and so on and so forth. And those are not Russians living in Estonia, but Estonians, actually. The older generation usually, who used to watch a lot Russian federal channels, TV channels. Nowadays they are all banned in Estonia, luckily. But still, it shows that lies, bigger lies, and very big lies actually work. And even in a relatively immune environment as we are against Russian propaganda, they can actually produce some results. But last point I would like to make is that actually Russians have succeeded heavily to make an unfortunately very significant impact on Western leaders. And the main impact, which is right now worries me a lot daily when I meet my colleagues in the Western allied countries. There is a shared understanding that Russia is unbeatable, that we cannot win this war in Ukraine, that we have to somehow find ways to negotiate the solution with war criminals like Putin and others. And this has been a incredibly successful so far, hopefully not till the end narrative what they have were able to put into our heads. And this is why we are so afraid of Russia today in the West, that we cannot put together a strategy which really leads us to a win in this war. But there is no other alternative. If we want to stop this informational warfare, which actually destroys our minds and distracts us from what should be done, the only path to that is to full victory in the war, and Russia must be strategically defeated.
Thanks for that, Marko. I'm just going to pick up on one of your points about that narrative about Estonians being fascists. Estonians living abroad, as well as Latvians, Lithuanians, Ukrainians, and Poles, were throughout the Cold War smeared with that label in order to discredit them and marginalize them in the eyes of our governments when we were advocating for their freedom. So it's something that we've experienced outside of our ancestral homelands as well. I'm going to go over to Jakub quickly. We've looked at the threats, the narratives that Jessica and Marko have outlined. I mean, you've been involved now for let's say about 10 years, more than that?
Nine.
Okay, no, close to 10 years in building up our resilience and the defenses against Russian and other foreign authoritarian disinformation. You've seen that progression, but you've also seen Russian information operations and how they've evolved against us. Would you say that we've had some success? Have we built up that? Martin Roger mentioned baseline resilience. Have we managed to establish that?
Thank you. Thanks for having me here, and thank you also for the extremely generous introduction. I will try and sound incredibly smart in order to raise to the level of how you introduced me. But it is undeniable that there has been some progress. So when we started the work in 2015 in Brussels with EU versus Disinfo, it felt like an extremely lonely job. We were one of the few voices in Western Europe calling this out. And obviously we were building on the experience of the frontline states like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, but also Ukraine, because Ukrainians have experienced a lot in this regard. So it is undeniable that there has been some progress. Let's just have a look at this year, calendar year 2024. Since the beginning of the year, we had major exposures by the French government with the Portal Combat campaign. Germans uncovered the Doppelganger campaign, Czechs and Poles with the Voice of Europe. So it is clear there has been some progress. However, I'm afraid it's still not enough. It's a bit like we are better at finally noticing that there is a problem, but we are still not stopping the Kremlin, and that's the trouble. They are still free to conduct their operations almost unopposed. We haven't raised the costs enough for them to stop them. So I think there is still a gap that needs to be filled. We still need to step up, and there is a lot that we could be doing in order to impose costs on them. I mean, we know who are the countries that have tripled and quadrupled their trades with Russia. It feels to me that it's a little bit similar as in the military domain. We are paying better attention to the Russian atrocities, because between 2015 and 2022, we have not paid that much attention, unfortunately. So we are paying better attention, but we are clearly not doing enough to stop them, which is not to say that we are not doing anything. Obviously, we are doing a lot, but we are still not stopping them. And that's what I find quite problematic. When we have a look at the opinion polls showing us how many people believe in various Russian disinformation narratives, like the West is to blame for the war in Ukraine, you would find that it can be 20, 30, 40% of the population in various European countries. The situation is probably the best in this region, in the north of Europe, in the 3 Baltic countries, in the Nordic countries, in Poland. But the more south, the more west you go, you would already find 1/3 of the population believing in these disinformation narratives. In countries like Serbia, it can be even over 50% of the population. So we see that Russians achieve successes. They manage to persuade significant parts of our populations about their lies. We see that politicians who are repeating Russian lies are winning elections, even in the EU and in NATO countries. And Russians will consider this their success. So I'm a bit afraid that some of the voices that we are already winning, and that after 2022 the West is paying attention and we have already won, we are already smart and we know what the Russians are doing. I think this might reflect the level of the policymakers, maybe of the journalists, of, let's say, information professionals. Maybe they are there, but I'm not 100% sure that the general public is there yet. I still think there is a lot that needs to be done. Yeah, there has been some progress, but I'm not sure if it's been enough. We are going in the right direction, but I'm still afraid that the Russians might be moving in their direction, in the opposite direction, a bit faster than we are.
Well, surely they're pouring resources into doing that, into achieving that. And once we get into the discussion, I do want to talk about the impact of those information operations in North America and Europe as well, and dig a little bit deeper into that. But before we do that, I want to go to my countryman, Jay Jansen, to talk a little bit. I mean, this is a NATO conference, and maybe, Jay, you can give us a little bit of insight of what's going on in NATO at SHAPE to defend our collective cognitive sovereignty. Which is also something that I think that a lot of Western societies and governments don't recognize as being an element that needs to be defended. So maybe you can give us a bit of an overview of what's going on at NATO.
Thanks, Marcus. First, to be clear, my area of expertise is in the military application of the cognitive dimension. So at Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, we are laser focused on explaining our military posture, our presence, and our activities to alliance populations so that they understand the utility, the benefits of these activities, so that they are resilient from informational attack from adversaries. And the second thing that we're doing is we're thinking and planning for what would happen if we were in a war with Russia, or if we faced a major crisis with terror groups. We haven't raised the issue of terror groups much today. My first exposure to what we now call disinformation was in Afghanistan, dealing with the Taliban insurgency in 2008, where they were regularly applying similar tactics and techniques to undermine our operations. And certainly Islamic State or Daesh, we're able to recruit millions of followers from around the world using informational techniques. And my thesis today is information is particularly powerful when it changes behavior. And that is what we really ought to be worried about. Information for information's sake, okay, it can be troubling, we should pay attention. But when it starts to affect the behavior of citizens, we really need to pay attention. So we have created a campaign in the NATO military structure to make sure that we're not only reacting to disinformation, but we are proactively going out and creating some kind of impacts in the information space. When we deal with our own populations, our objectives are twofold. building the cohesion of the alliance, which is counter to what Russia is trying to do. They're trying to break apart our cohesion. So instead of just combating disinformation regarding our cohesion, we go out and demonstrate our cohesion through exercises, through partnerships, through working together. We also want to assure our populations that we are a defensive alliance, that what we do is appropriate, it's aligned with the rule of law, and that we ought to be invested in because our shared values, our prosperity, our ways of life depend on a foundation of security. More globally and with our partners, it's about legitimacy. And the biggest boon to NATO legitimacy in the last decade is having Finland and Sweden join this alliance. Russia has added great partners like North Korea and Iran, where we have attracted partners like Finland and Sweden. I think just about anybody globally can sense the difference that's there. And then lastly, with adversaries, for us, it's about one thing. We're not going to convince the Russian population or the Russian decision makers to like us. We know that. We want to convince them not to attack us. It's all about deterrence. It's about demonstrating to Russian leadership, Russian military decision makers, that they have no advantage, not in geography, not in any particular domain, like the maritime domain, the space domain, the cyber domain, or in readiness. And so exercise Steadfast Defender, that's finishing at the end of this month. 90,000 troops from across the alliance deployed over a period of months, conducting very high-level multi-domain military operations at scale, the types of which Russia can only dream of. We believe that this is a very convincing, compelling message to the Russian leadership that, things aren't perfect, but we are ready. We need to invest more in a bunch of capabilities. I'll end there, but Russia isn't 10 feet tall. We've got a story to tell, and my approach is let's get out, proactively show who we are, focus on changing the attitudes and behaviors of audiences we want to change, and let's take the game to the Russians for a change.
That sounds great. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Just a quick follow-up. How do you feel that? Feel that NATO's having success in responding to this "blame NATO for everything" narrative that Russia is trying to promote both in the Western world and beyond? That NATO was responsible for the war in Ukraine and pretty much all other geopolitical problems in the world. Are we having success?
Yes and no. I think Russia's number one target with that narrative is their own population. Russia can't afford to be seen to be struggling in a conflict with Ukraine, so they've turned it into a conflict with all of NATO and all of the West. And that's much more convenient to mobilize their population, to get them into an all-in type of an attitude. And our capacity to be able to interrupt that narrative with the Russian people, it's extremely low. And I'll admit right now that at the military level, we're not even trying, because unlike Russia, we don't believe it's our place in peacetime to interfere into the internal politics of another sovereign nation. Will we do that if we're attacked? Yes, but not until we're very close to that point. Within our own populations, I think these narratives gain little traction. Perhaps in a few countries, they do gain some traction. We're paying attention to that, and we're rolling out counter campaigns to deal with it. And then in other places where NATO is unknown or the West has a sketchy reputation, places in Africa, Latin America, and further afield, they do get some traction. But I'll come back to my initial premise. In those places, we're not seeing it drive behavior. They're not, nations aren't lining up behind Russia to support them in tangible ways. So we're not so worried about those spaces at the moment.
Okay. Marco, yeah. So Marco, you were switching earlier, and then you want to jump in there.
Actually, I would like to just add up a little bit what General said right now. It is incredibly important what you do and what NATO is doing from military side. And in Estonia, we have a major exercise right now. Spring Storm is going on, and it's really like to have allies there doing visible things, and that will definitely have a very positive impact in that terms on our population, but also in terms of deterrence, what is so badly needed. But I would like to still argue that there is also political side of NATO, and that is not as good in terms of cohesion and unity in terms of how do we handle these kind of informational attacks. And Russians, they have succeeded in a way right now that some leaders, I'm not going to name them, but some leaders in NATO are very much afraid to show that we are some sort of kind of participant helping Ukraine to win this war. It is incredible that so far as I know, there has not been any visit collectively by ambassadors of NATO to Kiev. And reason is that some member states think that if we go collectively as ambassadors of NATO to Kiev, we will provoke Russia. That we will show that, NATO is behind of this, what is happening in Ukraine, and that is shows that we put some sort of self-limitations for our action. But I very much argue that what you said about being proactive, this is extremely important, that we have to be proactive also in informational warfare. Actually, one of the first strategies what Putin adopted when he became president of Russia in 2000 was a strategy of informational security. And that is, as a KGB officer, knew very well what should be done in order to sort of launch what we have seen during the last 20 years.
Well, let's look at some of the impacts of those narratives that Jessica brought up on the screen and that we've talked a little bit about here on Western democratic societies. And Jaakko brought up some polling questions. I think Martin Roger brought up the need to avoid playing political football, for example, with Ukraine. But these are all partisan issues that Russia recognizes that it can exploit. And, we've seen them do this with polarizing issues starting back with COVID, with anti-vaccination narratives. We saw it in Canada as well. And I think that you could argue that the delay in the delivery of the U.S. aid to Ukraine was the result, to a certain degree, of Russian influence operations. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think we saw her regularly posting outrageous Russian-aligned conspiracy theories on her Twitter account.
I will bring a very live experience from my recent meeting with one of the MAGA representative in the U.S. Congress. It was early February. We traveled to Washington 3 times during this kind of limbo period of helping Ukraine, and one of the members of U.S. Congress told us that, initially I was very strong supporter of Ukraine, but when I traveled to Poland and I met Ukrainian politicians who told us that after the war they would like to establish some kind of Wagner type military units in Ukraine, and this is why this is totally against our the way of thinking how the kind of things should go. And we asked, from where did you get this kind of BS? They couldn't answer on that. Obviously, that the narratives which are spread it by all kind of websites and bubble groups, they actually have a direct impact on those who make decisions. And unfortunately, we see that more than half of Republicans voted against Ukrainian aid this time. And this is not only Trump factor.
Well, and it's not surprising. I mean, some of the polling that we conducted with Disinfo Watch about a year ago demonstrated that support amongst, for example, far-right conservatives in the U.S., we've seen a shift there, and in Canada specifically, those narratives are having an impact. It's on those fringe far-right sites, but also on the far left where these narratives are promoted. The polling numbers demonstrate that they are having an impact. In fact, in Canada, just last week, we saw the leader of the Green Party, they only have one seat in Parliament, she read out a petition that was put together by her constituents calling for Canada to remove itself, to step out of NATO. This was in the Parliament of Canada, this petition was read. And this is directly related to Russian disinformation narratives. So clearly they are having an impact. What are you seeing, and how can we push back against this exploitation of our freedoms, of our democracy, where Russia exploits those debates and those divisions?
And maybe since you were talking also about the narratives targeting our decision makers, maybe we should add the nuclear intimidation as well, because this was also quite well documented. I believe Kirjal spent 1 or 2 reports with that from Chatham House, how some of the Russian narratives got repeated by some of the Western decision makers. We can't help Ukraine because we would risk nuclear escalation, which is a card that Russia brings up repeatedly. That's documented in some of the older texts by Vladislav Bittman from the 80s, that after 1956 Hungary, after 1968 Czechoslovakia, 1979 Afghanistan, every time they brought up the same playbook. If you help the victims of our aggression, there will be nuclear war. Sometimes some researchers think that when the Russians are repetitive and predictable, that they can be laughed at. My fear is that Russians are repetitive because they see it works. They repeatedly see the results. They stick to what works. The ways to push back, I mean, there are actually so many, and some of the best practices are coming from the frontline states, from Ukraine, from the 3 Baltic countries. There is so much we could be doing. I think we are actually doing some of the measures, but simply on a very small scale. That's the trouble, that Russia is spending these billions that go into this disinformation industry, whereas we are spending millions to counter it. And this is not a fight we can win. We can have better values, we can speak the truth against their lies, but in case they keep outnumbering us 1,000 to 1, we will be losing some audiences. That's the trouble. So I think it's not a rocket science what we should be doing. I think most of it is being done. We need more of the documentation. We need more of exposing of the campaigns. We need more of raising awareness about these campaigns in order to reach more audiences. And again, here the numbers are really key. We need different actors for different audiences. If I, in my suit and with a history in Brussels or US think tank, if I went to the Czech countryside, I wouldn't really be the best speaker there. So we need to be looking for different actors who will be delivering the message to different audiences. But we also need to try and limit the capabilities of the Kremlin to cause harm. And I think we are missing a lot here. They still have too many resources. And this is us to blame for this. When we have a look at the list of biggest advertisers on Russian state TV in the last year before the invasion, 2021, there are biggest Western companies there: Nestle, Oriflame, Richard Banksisser. Western companies were paying for anti-Western propaganda. We were financing it. So I'm not really sure. Have we made sure that no Western company can spend a single dollar on the Russian market? I'm not really sure we've done this homework. But unless we allow Western companies to finance this machine, it will cause harm.
Let me just quickly use my privilege as the moderator to jump in there and add one little point. I completely agree with you about those advertisers. On the flip side, I work closely with Russian and Belarusian independent media and journalists. And their biggest problem right now in getting the truth and facts into Russia and Belarus is that they've been demonetized by companies like Google and YouTube. So when you have someone like Sergei Smirnov and Mediazona producing YouTube videos that get 1 million views in 24 hours, they should be seeing some form of revenue from that. They get nothing. at this point. Because YouTube refuses to pay them and has demonetized them. So it works the other way as well. I mean, these Western companies really need to we need to look at how they're operating in terms of supporting Russian disinformation and not supporting those that are fighting back against it. Sorry, Jay, I jumped in there.
No, I think you're onto something, Marcus. And it comes back to, let's not just counter what the adversary is doing in the information space. Let's understand their strategy. Let's have our own strategy. And let's apply it in a way that undercuts what they're doing and forwards what we want to do. And let's take again the example of the far right and the effectiveness of some of the Russian narrative in those spaces. I think it's not just a case of Russia flinging out certain narratives and hoping that they will stick. I think it's them understanding an audience that they are targeting, understanding the dissatisfaction with some of the social change and the societal tension that exists, and then setting their narrative up to be the defender of those people, not only in Russia, but also you in America or you in Germany that are on the right and feeling disaffected because of these changes. Well, guess what? Vladimir Putin is the guy who's standing up for your values. And boy, oh boy, now we're talking about changing attitudes and behaviors. And so what should we be doing about it? Well, we've got to understand how they're going about targeting those audiences. We've got to be able to break that cycle, whether it's legislation with social media companies, whether it's frank conversations in our society, whether it's changes in the education system. And then I guess we've got to think long and hard about how will we, if we need to, do the same things in the Russian information space if we're attacked. And regrettably, they have cut off avenues of approach. It is very difficult for us to be able to communicate, even in a very factual, transparent way, to break into the Russian system. They've kicked out the NGOs, they've kicked out the media, they've kicked out civil society, they've kicked out the opposition. So they hear one voice. It's a real conundrum, and it's going to require some strategy and brain power to fix it.
Yeah, maybe it's back to the old samizdat with the small printing presses. Marco?
Yeah, no, it's incredibly interesting. Actually, there is two sides. One is how to defend better our own open societies, and you mentioned here what should be done in a way, and we have learned also from our side what can be at a minimum level to do, as an open society who protects the basic freedom of speech and the basic values, and that this is always dilemma there, and they know that this is for us very, very sort of critical question. How far you can go to limit the people's voices, let's say, but certainly everything what comes under the name of Russian media right now should be banned. Everywhere, in at least in the democratic world. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Still, RTs and Russian federal channels can be seen in hotels around the world. I mean, in the Western world, and this is kind of least what can be done with social media, and especially with channels like Telegram. It's much more complicated and difficult. But then it comes to the question of offensive our approach. What can we do? We cannot use the same tools what they do. They know perfectly our societies. They have mapped societies for many decades, actually, and initially they were supporting communist parties or the left or far right throughout decades. Now they're focusing more on so-called traditional values, and so finding support in those camps. But what we can do is to use as asymmetric approach here. And I think the only way how you can reach up to the mind of those zombies living in Russia, and zombies, they are not zombies for, created by Putin's KGB gang during last 20 years, but for many decades actually, and this is why it's so difficult to penetrate into their brains. But the one what really can shock them is a kind of defeat in real action, in real war. And this is something what really can also help us to crack their sort of seemingly monolith kind of the way how the Russian, not society, but kind of Russian people are. So it is rather difficult, but this is, for that we need this strategy, winning strategy in this war, which includes also defense of our own informational space.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, I often get asked this in Canada, about the freedom of expression, protecting that, and I completely agree. We need to protect that. That's part of this job, is protecting the sovereignty of that information space. And when we talk about outlets like RT, Sputnik, or any other authoritarian outlets, these are regimes that are weaponizing information against us to attack the sovereignty of our democracy. So I think that we need to have, at least in many of these democratic nations, including Canada, we need to have a shift to that understanding, which I think has long ago already happened in places like Estonia. I want to now shift to quickly the question of costs. You brought up, Jakob, the question of consequences and costs, and I think this is an important one. Often the Russian narratives that we see injected into our information space, whether they're Twitter, RT, they're not necessarily going to be seen by a large number of people. But it is the proxies, the enablers, the influencers that are in these nations. And I go back to Johan Backman, someone who was doing this work, either as a useful idiot or as otherwise. That's where these narratives are spreading, and we're seeing that in a nation like Canada that doesn't get a lot of attention, whereby you have far left and far right influencers who are repeating these narratives to an ever-growing personal audience, and that's where we're seeing them end up in places like the Parliament of Canada. So how do we deal with domestically those influencers, proxies, and enablers? How do we raise the cost with them and on these foreign governments? I think Estonia has demonstrated they've done this very effectively. I mean, back in 2012, Johan Backman was placed on Estonia's sanctions list, wasn't allowed to travel to Estonia. There's a concrete consequence, and I think Estonian security services do a very good job of actually exposing some of these influencers publicly as well. So what could we be doing more of, and can we learn from countries like Estonia?
I actually think there is a lot of measures. So first, which might be the simplest one actually, start using the already existing laws. Freedom of speech is sacrosanct, but it has its limitations in every democratic country, and for a very good reason. If I own a bank, I can't tell my clients, I will multiply your money and then run away with them and say, it was my freedom of speech to deceive you. We have laws against that. We have laws against spreading defamation, spreading libel, undermining the statehood of a country. And I do believe that quite a few of the pseudo-journalists working for the Russian pseudo-media were kicked out of the 3 Baltic republics precisely for violating these laws, undermining statehood, threat to national security, spreading false alarm. I mean, whenever you have a look at any disinformation outlet, they are trying to persuade you that Europe is substituting the white population with Muslims, that your government is trying to kill you with COVID vaccination, planting Bill Gates' microchips. I mean, what else is spreading false alarm? This is exactly why we have the law, and we have not enforced it very well in many countries. Then you really have the kind of nuclear option, just banning the outlets. And Ukraine has shown us that you can do it not just with the Russian-owned outlets, but you can also do it with the outlets that are owned by somebody else, but they are still spreading exactly the same disinformation, like the Viktor Medvedchuk's channels that Zelensky's administration shut down. And I think, again, if we are a little bit creative, we could be translating our sanctions against RT and Sputnik into this. And I think it was, again, in Estonia where the sanctions against Dmitry Kiselyov were used quite creatively in a way that actually Sputnik journalists were not capable of hiring offices or opening a bank account. Your top guy is sanctioned, that means you can't work in this country. there are ways how we can use the already existing regulations. But I think part of the package should be simply denying access, and this has to go on every single level. It has to be the governments, no accreditations for the pro-Kremlin pseudo-media, not inviting them to the press conferences. It has to go to the media, not inviting them to balance the debate. It's not a balance. If balanced diet is for proteins and vegetables, it's not for mixing proteins and Novichok. That's not a balanced diet. So it's not reasonable to invite somebody who's just spreading Kremlin's lies in order to balance. But this should go also for the social media. The Fifth Amendment, or whatever the equivalent is in any other country, it does not tell you that you have to give these guys platform. Yeah. It does not. They are still free to spread their lies, just on a different platform, not on yours. So there are many ways how we can restrict and limit their options, and I think we are still not using them fully.
One aspect that we have to be careful about is accountability of governments. In democracies, governments need to be accountable to the electorate, and you could see how some of this legislation could be abused. If a government didn't like a particular critic, there could be abuse, and this would be a slide in the wrong direction as well. So my view is...
As we see right now happening in Georgia.
Exactly, as we see happening in Georgia. Good point. But it could happen in our countries as well, and in fact, if we're honest, perhaps in some allies this is occurring to a degree. So my view is government needs to be proactive, they need to take action, but we also need some kind of very credible, neutral third party that can adjudicate and make sure that we maintain the trust in government that governments need to earn.
But this is a problem that can be solved, actually. So the French vision, they have an oversight board where you have people not just like from the parliament, but you also have academics, you have media professionals. So this is a problem that actually can be solved if you design the oversight board, or whatever you want to call it, if you design it in a good way. So I think it's good to bear it in mind, obviously, but I think it can be solved.
Yeah, I completely agree. The question is credibility then. We saw what happened with Nina Jankowicz in the US when she was appointed to that role. So making sure that we do take a proper whole of society approach is critically important, including media, social media, and elected officials as well, political parties. They play a part of this, and making sure that they're aware of when these information operations are targeting us, that they have an understanding of it too.
Yeah, as a former journalist, I think that the more important role playing the media outlets, I mean mainstream media, professional media, whatever are there in social media or kind of in the mainstream publications. And they are of course challenged by the kind of algorithms and everything what makes their readers to pay attention to, and they are kind of pushed in a way to publish something which is perhaps recreates this kind of will to spread kind of crazy narratives or so, because they are getting attention. Think about Trump and 2016 campaign. This was media made more or less or mainstream media who made him to become closer to the presidency. Additional to that, of course, Russian interference. The one interesting area what I would like to hear more is, and our British colleagues keep very much kind of quiet and silences, but what was a Russian role during the Brexit campaign, for instance, and so this is one of the kind of good examples to learn what they did that time. But anyway, it's I think what is important is that accountability. Yes, absolutely, this is important. But at the same time, for instance, if we acknowledge that we are in the middle of basically wartime in Europe, and those who use in the streets of our cities the flags of aggressor state to rally for this war. This is totally unacceptable, for instance, in Estonia, to see any demonstrations of those who come out with Russian flags or old Soviet Union flags to wave for, I don't know, Victory Day or so. This is simply banned. We have legislation on that we cannot, in public space, use these symbols which actually resemble the aggression against Ukraine today or in the past against Europe. So there are actually good practices what nations can share right now, but it also demands kind of political will to implement them.
Well, just on that point about these demonstrations and those symbols of hate that we're seeing, we've seen those in Canada as well since 2015. After the initial annexation of Crimea, the Russian embassy poured all sorts of money into advancing Victory Day parades. And this is, you could argue, an incitement of hate. It's a denial of the occupation and the repressions that happened throughout Central and Eastern Europe during that time. But you bring up a good point. It's about coordination between nations. How much coordination is going on right now? I mean, whether it's within NATO, other international institutions within the EU. Again, looking from that side of the Atlantic, my sense is that at least from there isn't too much coordination going on that's involving all of NATO's allies in this discussion. Maybe I'm wrong. How important is that coordination, though?
Well, I can speak only to the military level. I can tell you there's a high degree of coordination. Good. In fact, every month we have a strategic communication coordination board where the military communicators from the capitals dial in and we talk about the next 3 months. What are we trying to achieve? What do we believe the threats are in the information environment? What are the opportunities? We don't try to coordinate everything. We don't tell allies what they can and can't do. What we do say is, for the 20% of the most important stuff in our lane, how are we going to work together so that we are trying to achieve the same thing at the same time with a unified voice? And I'll tell you, it works. We need more of it.
You know, I would like to come back to this. You mentioned this 2015 and how weird it was in Brussels to have this kind of unit. And Estonia was one of the countries who really supported among other like-minded ones to establish this unit to fight disinformation. And that time for some of allies, it was our partners in the EU looked like we are going to provoke Russians or somehow, make our relations more difficult or so. But remember, 2015, this was already 12 months after they occupied and annexed Crimea. But today the situation is, as I think, is much better than 10 years ago. So.
I certainly would hope so. So it's not just the Stratcom anymore, and even the Stratcom is already bigger, significantly bigger than it used to be. But now you have other activities within the EAS, like a team focusing on China, a team focusing on the Western Balkans, and there is more happening across the European Commission. European Parliament is stepping up actually as well. So I think there is something happening. If I get back to the coordination, I mean, I think the EU has this rapid alert system connecting practitioners in the EU member states that should be exchanging information about the most recent incidents of disinformation campaigns in their countries. There was some speculation about how effective it is, but it is a start, so at least it's there, it's good. Those who want to be active can use it, so they can drive the activity there. I guess we are trying to do something on a little bit more strategic level, not so much on the tactical level, but every year we gather the practitioners in countering disinformation here in Helsinki, and we have them behind the closed doors exchanging experience, what works, what doesn't work, where do we have some gaps. Last year we uncovered that everybody has a problem with measuring the impact of disinformation campaigns, so we commissioned a report on that. How can you actually try and estimate? So there is some coordination, but I think, again, and I will probably repeat myself, I still think we need way, way more. And very often I see the problem of not having somebody who would own the problem. And very often you would find people in the institutions trying to look for this excuse. Okay, so maybe it will be somebody else who will pick it up and not me. And I think it would really help if we would have one designated owner. There are some debates about whether the centralized model that we would see, for example, in France or in Sweden is better than the decentralized model. And there are some countries that have a very good experience with the more decentralized model. I actually think Estonia, Lithuania are these countries. But it seems to me that having a designated agency like Visionim, like MPF in Sweden, I do think that it is helpful because there is very clear responsibility who owns the problem. You can't pretend, so maybe it's somebody else who should pick this up.
Just quickly, how does the Swedish model, how does that work?
So they have this agency, Psychological Defense Agency. They are responsible for documentation. They are responsible for raising awareness. I believe they focus mainly on the target audience in the civil service, but also the political parties, also the media, so kind of, you could say, the critical hubs. They are not so much out in the public, as far as I understand, but I mean, with these resources, you have to pick your fights. I believe they have under 50 people. They had this big discovery with the Shon Islamia campaign, this campaign that Sweden is stealing kids from Muslim families, which was unfortunately a campaign that also played a role in some of the Muslim countries that were deciding about Swedish accession to NATO. So I think this was their biggest exposure in the last year or two. I hope I'm not misleading about their work too much. And maybe if I may, one more sentence to this Brexit influence. I think you struck a point there that this is actually, I think, another measure how we could try and impose the costs on the bad actors. Investigate it better. Let's have a look at the Mueller's investigation, and we have nothing better so far. They forced social media companies to release an enormous amount of data, and you still see researchers working with this. I know that there are some Americans who would say, well, it actually didn't help to decrease the polarization in the audience. I don't think this is what investigation is for. Investigation is not there for decreasing the dividing lines or decreasing the polarization. Investigation is there to establish the facts and to find the perpetrators and to punish them. and there were legal consequences after the Mueller's investigation. And I find it horrible that in Europe we had at least 24 elections and referenda targeted by the Russians. Just in my home country, both of the presidential elections in 2013, 2018, the Brexit referendum, Catalonia, Italian constitutional referendum, the name referendum in North Macedonia, which was also targeting Greece. I mean, we would find examples almost every year. And I'm not aware of a single similar investigation, and probably the closest was in the UK, where the parliamentary committee, intelligence committee, came to the conclusion the government has not done enough. You have not investigated the Russian interference into the Brexit referendum.
In Canada right now, we're going through a federal inquiry into foreign interference, specifically, primarily Chinese interference in our past two elections. And I'll say it's very difficult for certainly the government, and I think for Canadians to accept the fact that there was interference in an election. So it is much easier just to sort of sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not there.
Yeah, because people don't know, if we attribute that there is a direct interference from Russia, what should we do? You know, and there are so many different cases. You know, we have actually kept silence in a situation that Russians have done some kind of crazy stuff, and we have just decided that okay, if we now attribute something, we have to act. But are we ready to act up? You know, but what I wanted to say is that actually there are good examples here in Finland and also in Estonia. For elites, I mean, people from different kind of professions, from politics, from business community, from cultural elite. So we organize biannual national defense courses where people from different angles come together and actually get the same picture, what is going on, and what is kind of our priorities. And Sven, our ambassador, is one of the key person there for years also during our courses. And that is producing some sort of kind of coherent understanding among those who either make decisions or are kind of leaders in society. It's very difficult to believe that we can somehow bring together everybody because it's so atomized our societies today are, and we cannot ban just social media telling that okay, we have to now kind of get back to the ground zero again. So that is very good and positive example what we learned initially from Finland and then now introduced already for many years in Estonia.
This is something that I think that all Western democracies can learn from those defense courses. Elected officials, they go through them. This should be mandatory in, I think, all Western nations. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I do want to touch on quickly on a subject that's close to my heart, and that's transnational repression and the intimidation of activists and journalists. We have a journalist here who's a prime example of what that looks like. We've heard from Jessica and her experience. I think there are other people in this room who have been targets of this sort of transnational repression, whether it's coming directly from Russia or some of the influencers, the proxies and enablers in our home countries. What could we be doing to defend our journalists from this sort of intimidation, the civil society activists from foreign transnational repression? Is there anything that we can do? Apparently not.
I mean, I guess it has to start in debates with them. But I noticed, for example, the case of Catherine Belton in the UK, where it was clear that she basically needed financial resources just to face the armies of lawyers that were sent by the pro-Russian proxies in London. So sometimes they just need that. Sometimes they need legal support, and I believe that was the case of Jessica as well. So these might be the number one tasks, but I guess there should be something also on the second level, and again maybe introducing some costs for the perpetrators, which means we should probably investigate it properly. So who is paying for this lawyer who is harassing a journalist in my country? But then it would require for us to be a little bit more creative. I mean, sometimes we don't have to hit them directly in the same domain where they are hitting us, right?
Right.
So sometimes we can be a little bit more creative. So you do this, you harass journalists in my country. That means another 5 diplomats kicked out of your embassy. I'm not saying it has to be this particular thing, but
absolutely. Jay?
Hey, Marcus, you know this. Jessica knows this. When you get targeted by these foreign actors, the worst feeling is to feel like you're alone and you're defenseless against it. And to see people back away from you slowly because they're afraid that they will be targeted, that is really intimidating. So, my recommendation would be similar to what you were saying. We need to send a very strong signal that people who have the courage to stand up against this kind of behavior won't be alone. They will get the resources they need. They will get the support they will need. They will be believed. And I think just that would make a tremendous difference for people.
Amen.
I think this is, for us, very important to recognize that those who really are like investigative journalists, like Jessica, for instance, they are defenders of our national interests. And if somebody goes after them, we have to defend them, help them to defend themselves, and including also, of course, first and foremost, media outlets. But if they are independent, then it's a kind of our duty to make sure that those who attack them cannot succeed. I was lucky to be active journalist during 90s when there were no social media, and but I was harassed by Russian foreign ministry as well in 1995. When I came back from Budyonovsk, I covered Chechen War, first Chechen War, and I remember I wrote some critical all the time, critical articles, but specifically one was in June '95, and the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs invited me to have a kind of specific talk, and they threatened me to expel from Russia in 1995. Nobody knew about Putin at that time. So, but they decided that we won't do that. You'll be too popular in Estonia after that. But they never stopped. They let me know that they are watching, because they had a kind of huge file of my articles, all translated from Estonian to Russian. Kind of. They made me know that they're watching, but it didn't, of course, change my kind of approach.
But I wonder if this is something that can be brought up at the European level to figure out some sort of a way to create a mechanism to support those journalists and activists who are targeted in a formal way, to make sure that there are ways to report these incidents when we are being targeted by intimidation. That's so necessary. I know in at least in the Canadian context, there is no support. You're completely alone when this sort of thing happens. And so maybe we can work together to, at least the community of democracies, NATO states, allies, to create that sort of a support. We're out of time. I don't think we even have time for questions, unless there are there any questions?
Yes, I think we can take one or two if there are any.
When there was this cable incident in the Baltic Sea, then Estonian government was criticized that there was a delay of the information, and the Finnish news channels and also Swedish news channels informed immediately the public. And I even got a question next day from the Estonian broadcast that could I comment that when I learned about this cable incident. Marco, could you explain, or do you have more information? Is there any strategy that if there will happen some kind of incident in the Baltic Sea, that how we will learn it?
Still a very good question. I'm just a simple MP, servant of the people, and I'm not a member of executive branch. This was actually a good experience for all of us, for Estonia, for Finland, on governmental level, as far as I have learned and heard. And actually, initial probably situation was a little bit kind of hectic in a way. But end of the day, the cooperation between two countries was excellent and still excellent. And actually now as allies in NATO makes us much more easier to conduct kind of cooperation in terms of investigation of this kind of situations, to put mildly. So what we are arguing at home in Estonia as well, while we see that Russia is really ramping up right now all kind of sabotage activities and hybrid activities, not only in informational space. We exposed in Estonia a group of people and arrested them who were hired by Russian secret services to carry out some sort of acts of vandalism, like attacking a car of our Minister of Internal Affairs and so on and so forth. But this is not unique case. We see right now that in different NATO allied countries they are much more robust, active, and visible. So the cooperation on a level of our allied countries is extremely important. And I know that there is sharing of information between partner services is on a rather good level to stand against against Russian malign operation. But also what is extremely important, that we should not be afraid to attribute if it's really needed, and if we are sure that Russia or China is behind of this kind of situations.
Yeah, great.
Okay, then we have one there.
How do we counteract this sort of Western or global tendency to still see the Baltic states as somehow Russophobic? Say, when one of these incidents comes up, then often when it's reported, the first reaction is, oh, those Balts are being paranoid and overreacting, that this can't be a real sort of threat, that they are making this up because they're paranoid. And somehow that is still, we're part of the NATO family, the EU family, but even our partners in NATO and EU instinctively don't necessarily trust our judgment of our professional security services when something like this happens, and tend to see that, oh, they're just instinctively Russophobic and exaggerating or overblowing the situation. Or Jay, you're inside NATO. Maybe I got the wrong perception. Inside NATO, then
Well,
the
I think
Italians and Portuguese are always trusting us immediately.
Prior to 2022, I saw firsthand evidence of what you're talking about. Intelligence assessments coming from the Baltic states and Poland were met with some skepticism from some nations. I think the big I told you so moment of 2022 has done a lot to change the views, and a lot more attention is being paid. And if you listen to General Cavoli, the Supreme Commander of NATO forces, I think you hear very sobering assessments of Russian intent, both now and the future, that are quite closely aligned with what Baltic intelligence services would share as well.
Andres, I could just recall numerous meetings with our Western colleagues recently, meaning during last 2 years. Then they say that, oh, we had to listen, you know, you were right. And so we don't use it. We don't tell that, oh yeah, we told you so. You know, it doesn't help in a way. But it's what we're asking them, please listen us right now. And this is problem that we still have kind of this gap.
Very short.
Yeah, exactly. Just follow up what Marco was saying, that's exactly my observation, that after the launch of the full-scale invasion, everyone is saying, yes, we should have listened to you, Balts, and you guys had the right analysis.
Yeah.
And so we've gotten that far, but the next logical step, that we shall now act upon your analysis, we haven't gotten there yet, right?
Yeah, good point.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's have an applause for the panelists. So we have had quite a lineup of experts from different perspectives giving us their opinions and sharing their knowledge today. So for this sort of finalization, I would like to invite with me to the stage Ilona Kolberg, or in her own words, a regular concerned citizen, to give some final thoughts and words on the day and bring us to a conclusion. Please.
Can we go?
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, when Estonian World Council decided that they will hold the traditional security conference in Helsinki, in Finland, then one of the reasons why it was decided was the fact that Finland had joined NATO. Of course, at first it was planned to go to NATO holding hands with Sweden. It didn't work out just like that, but happily now we are both in NATO. And I have to tell you that it was amazing how public opinion actually changed overnight drastically in Finland after 24th of February 2022. Finland had been having its neutral policies and trying to keep up very friendly diplomatic attitude, relations with Russia. And then suddenly their eyes really opened. That shows what it means to get awareness, public awareness. It's not only the institutions, the military, who have to understand the reality of the present situation, but also we have to have this public awareness of what is happening so that we can be resilient, not only as governments and public and institutions, but on the grassroots level as well. And yes, I would like to make you or remind you also that we are now in the country that has the longest border with Russia. It's 1,340 kilometers long, well, approximately 830 miles. And it's also, at the same time, it's a border of Estonian Union, the easternmost border, European Union, and also now NATO. So strategically, we can't be in a more important place right now. Trying to comment on all these problems that we have. And this border is now totally closed for several months since last autumn. It's an ongoing hybrid warfare situation. And this is due to the fact that Russia has, well, what's the term? Instrumentalized entry, has organized instrumentalized entry by bringing in, so to say, citizens or people from third countries, but nobody actually knows who they are, whether they are. Some of them don't have any documents. And since August, actually, during 2 months, almost 1,000 people got in already. We don't know yet if they actually are legitimately from third countries, because Russia is full of foreign workers who look like whoever from Asia or even Northern Africa. Well, I'm not an expert. I can't tell you what's the truth. But actually, that is the reason this instrumentalized entry threat is the reason why the border stays closed for now. And it's been publicly announced to the population by the Minister of Internal Affairs. So it's no secret. Finland tries to be very honest and straightforward, and this is what I really appreciate here. And so this, I would like to refer to our keynote speaker, Esi Karo, and her book Russian Trolls, that already dealt with these warfare, this information warfare problems, and it's a very interesting reading. I really recommend it. It's in English. I haven't read the new book because it only came out a few days ago, or a week, I think. And I hope it will soon be translated to English as well. But Jessica, in her book already showed these covert operations, what were done in Ukraine in 2014 in eastern Ukraine and Crimea. And actually, the West did not realize what was actually happening. So Russia succeeded in a way. Of course, Estonia knew. We know Russians. If you've spent your 40 years of your life in Soviet Union, then you know how this information warfare works, because it's nothing new. It's the same old story. All these lies, these covert operations, we all know these. Okay, perhaps not everyone was aware of it, and it didn't concern everyone, but these problems are there. So I would like just to make some general conclusion to our conference here, because as we can watch it later, then I don't have to give you any quotations from what were in abundance today. One of them was too little, too late, and in several aspects, and that's true. I have a close view of this because I have a relative living in Kiev who is director of children's animation club for 40 years. And in the first months of 2022, I waited almost every day in the morning for the message, "Dear Ilona, we are alive." If you don't have such close contact with it, you may think, well, it's not so close yet. But we have to make people aware that the threat is real. It's not on another planet. And we really do too little and too late. Because the suffering, I see the photos of the children who don't have a childhood anymore for 2 years. This is outrageous. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you came here from different countries and told us about how these things are attacked by official military organizations, especially by NATO, of course. I'm very proud that we are all member states of NATO now. And I would also like to say that as Mart already said, I really am not an expert in all these problems, or either also the information warfare. But I live in this country. I'm a citizen, and I'm a concerned citizen. And I'm happy. I think that behind those screens, there are many people like me who do not actually are experts in all this, but they need to know. They need to learn. They may need to be made aware. And this is one of the purposes why this conference was organized. And I thank you all that you took your time and really came and shared it all with us. And it gave us a lot of thinking material. And I really hope that Russia can't divide and rule us. And there's only one way. We have to help Ukraine win this war. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilona, so much for these words. So just to conclude, today we've come together, we've had a panel discussing NATO's role in the Baltic Sea region. We've discussed how, although Sweden and Finland are now member states, we should not be complacent, but we should strive to not do too little too late in the future. We've heard from Ambassador Hickey of the US's continued support to NATO, which hopefully will continue despite whatever happens in their elections. We've learned from Jessica Aro of how does Russia actually conduct their information warfare, what should we watch out for, and in our final panel we discussed how should we prepare as a community of Western nations against this kind of Russian aggression and information warfare. I would like to conclude by thanking the Estonian Embassy in Helsinki for hosting us today. Of course, the Estonian World Council for organizing this event, the Estonian Broadcasting Service ERR for live streaming it, and on behalf of the Estonian Organizations Network in Finland, thank you for coming, and let's continue these discussions in the future as well. Thank you.